All right, here we go. We are live. Anyone who is new, this is Ungovernable. I am Matt. I am flying solo. David is not with me this evening. He is spending time with his family, which is completely okay. Family first, as always. So you're stuck with me, but we have three awesome guests with us tonight, and we're going to be talking some crypto. So standard procedure here: like, comment, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell, retweet, help share this out there, and like and all the good stuff to help us with the algorithm. And if you are watching on either of the two blockchain-based streaming platforms that we stream to, those being Vim TV and Odyssey, please help out with a little bit of an upvote and help us out on those platforms as well. So without further ado, we're going to be talking crypto. We're doing kind of 101, and throughout our three guests, we'll kind of like build off of what we're talking about throughout the entire episode. I'm really happy to bring on the first guest of the evening. This is Scott C. Business. And Scott is actually how I got on the Hive, by watching Scott's video. So I think that's awesome. So how's it going, Scott?
That's going good. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. I want to say thank you for taking the time. So anyone who is not familiar with you, who are you and where can they kind of like find your content?
Yeah, so my main focus has been originally on crypto and blockchain related social media platforms. And then I started to dive a little bit into like crypto passive income, and then just kind of like being able to live fully decentralized, whether it's spending or whatever it happens to be. And I make content. I'm on pretty much every single platform that you can think of, and the ones that you can't think of. Yeah. And you can find me anywhere under at Scott C Business. And I've been creating content now for almost 4 years.
Awesome. That's incredible. So my first thought was, so I have young kids, and they like the Lego movie. And so your moniker, Scott C Business, is like, what is it, Lord Business or whatever for the Lego film?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, there's like no easy way to get my name as a username. And I tried like every variation, and eventually that was the only one that was available. So I just said, you know what, I'll just go with it.
Might as well run with it, definitely. All right, cool. So before we get into kind of like the educational portion, how and why did you get into crypto?
Yeah, so I went to school for networking and IT security. So I always kind of had that IT technical background, and everyone that sure. I went to school with, my friend group, it was all a little bit within our milieu, our social milieu, but I didn't really get into it until in 2017. Unfortunately for me, I bought like right near the end, and then it started to go way down, and I realized I wasn't the greatest at investing. It was my first time ever really investing in anything. I didn't even hold any stocks or anything at the time.
Sure.
And and so I it went way down. Obviously, I didn't sell, but it really just taught me that I'm not the most amazing at investing, but like there's something to this. And I started to look around, and not soon after I found Steam, and I've been doing social media marketing as my sort of day job for a long time now. And I was wondering, like, how could blockchain and crypto, how does that mend with social media, or where do those two worlds meet? And the first one, or the first platform that I ever found, was Steam. And Steam It as the interface. And for a long time, I was just exploring that, making content about that, because the biggest thing was that there was no educational content out there. And I wanted it just for myself, but then I figured I might as well kind of like document it and then share it as like a guide for other people who have the same concerns, or there is a lack of education in the space. So I started doing that for a while, and then I started to look at other platforms, and then just continually built everything out, and just continued making guides for other platforms and teaching people. And it's kind of just blossomed, and I've just kept it going and started doing interviews and a bunch of other stuff, and it's kind of just grown from there.
Yeah, I love that. It's so I love asking people, because people come to blockchain from all different places, right? Like if you were a gamer and you came because of the gaming environment, that was
Hmm.
one reason. Some people came for more like we're gonna have Crimsonclad on in an hour. She's very much from kind of like the artistic, but she's also a programmer kind of space and kind of perspective. But yeah, the how people get to blockchain, I always think is really interesting. And it doesn't always have to be political, right? Like there can be very valid reasons outside of the politics of it to come to blockchain and kind of find a home, so to speak, or really kind of exist in that sphere. So let me ask you, the like getting started. What do you see as like the biggest impediment to people getting into blockchain?
Um, that's a hard one. I would say that it seems very complex to people coming in, and this is partially why I focused on social media, because I think naturally social media is going to be one of the most important ways that people onboard to crypto,
Mm.
especially when they learn about how, like, I can share what I'm already sharing, but I might be able to earn cryptocurrency for it. I
Oh
think
yeah.
people are like I don't know, activated in a sense. Like at first they were kind of switched off, but then once you give them free crypto or get them a little bit started, then they're kind of like activated. And they're like, okay, how do I do this? How do I get all this? But if they don't have that original motivation, they're not. They're like, people don't look at, like, they don't look at the economy, say, oh my god, there's all this inflation, what do I do? Let me join like Hive. Instead it's more like you get a little bit of free crypto in some way, and then you're like, okay, how do I actually keep this going? How do I get this out? How do I actually spend this? And I think once people kind of follow through on all that, then naturally it kind of gets them involved in the space. It's hard to get people to just go through this massive paradigm shift. And I mean, it's the same for anything, right? Like even for the internet, my parents took so long to really get started, and they're still like very preliminary with the internet. And the reason that most people use the internet today is just because you don't really need to understand it, and
Mm.
I would argue most don't. And that's why people are able to use the internet so well, and that's what blockchain needs to get to, and then everyone will be using it. So I think that one of the biggest things right now is just not understanding why they need to care, and then
Mm.
just the complexities, or at least the perceived complexities around getting started, because obviously it's getting easier and easier from when I first started to where we are now.
Oh yeah. No, it's daunting because there's like a learning curve, right? And also because it is, I mean, it's not new, but like in terms of it starting to kind of like catch on, it's new in that context. And it is kind of like the Wild West in a way because things are
Hmm.
changing so rapidly and there's so many different kind of like new startups and stuff like that to keep tabs of. I mean, like you can feel like you're drinking from a fire hose if you really start to kind of get into it. The just the account creation process itself has evolved dramatically over like the last 12, 18 months, which
Hmm.
I think is a huge positive because the last thing you want is someone who's interested in the actual platform and then they just can't even get started, right? Like it has to be as user friendly as possible. I think it's getting there. So from like a layman's perspective or in layman's terms, what's the difference with from blockchain to say like the traditional kind of like web computing space right now? What does that juxtaposition look like?
Yeah. So first, I'll preface with saying kind of what I was just saying, that people don't need to necessarily understand all the intricacies of blockchain, and what is mining, and how is this block being mined, and all these different things. And again, it kind of goes back to just like the internet. You don't really need to fully understand it to use it. You just need to know how to use it. And I would argue that's pretty much the same with anything. Most people don't know how combustion in a car engine works. They just need to know how to drive the car and the rules of the road. So it's the same with blockchain, where you just kind of need to know the basics, and then you need to know just how to operate within the space, and understand, because a lot of people get like, I think this is probably one of the biggest pain points, is that they say, okay, well, wait, no, I don't want to start my account until I fully understand what is this mining process and how does this work. And then they get lost in the intrinsic, all the stuff. And it would be the same as being like, do you want to play basketball? It's like, not until I fully understand physics and how the ball leaves my hand and the mathematics. And it's like, that's what is kind of like stopping people.
Yeah.
In layman's terms, how is it different from like our current system? I would say, again, it's hard to really see the difference unless you understand the problems. So first you need to understand the problems, and then you can see the solutions, because otherwise the solutions aren't really needed if you don't think there's a problem.
Right.
And the problem is centralization and inflation, or at least just, poor financial, like a bad economy, really. And it's just kind of, once you're aware of these things, and once you've kind of internalized and grasped why I need to, learn about inflation, why does it matter, things like that, then you're like, okay, what's the solution? And one of the best solutions is blockchain. And again, what I was also saying is centralization is the other issue. So again, most people don't see the issue, because they're like, what, if I need money from my bank, I'll go to the bank, I'll take out the money.
Yep.
But, if 10% of all people wanted to do that, then the banks would have no money left. And
it's the Bailey
and
savings
people,
and loan model. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So if people don't see this inherently, then there's no reason to go and invest in Bitcoin, buy gold, do any of these things. And I think, yeah, it's really just internalizing, understanding that problem first, because otherwise it just doesn't really matter to people. Like, it's hard to, because for a lot of us in the crypto space who have already learned all these things, it's like an existential thing. It's like, I need to protect myself from the future, from all these crazy things that might come our way. And you only really start to get down that rabbit hole once you start to learn about crypto, and you learn about, the problems with our economy and stuff. And it's a complete paradigm shift. I would argue that trying to spend, store, and earn crypto will completely shift your entire approach to finance. And for me, it's like forced me to be much more frugal. I don't want to spend this because it might be worth more tomorrow. So every transaction, every exchange is so much more meaningful. And you actually think about, like, do I actually need this? Is it better if I wait? And I think that it kind of forces you to have a much better, just generic personal financial skills, which is a big part of it. Because, I mean, again, a lot of people don't budget, they don't save, they don't invest. And all of these things kind of all encompass up into learning about crypto, in my opinion, or at least in my experience. Once you start to get into crypto or investing of any kind, it kind of opens you up to all that, to learning more about personal finance, learning more about investing, whether it's the stock market or crypto. Everyone needs to learn that kind of stuff, because you don't learn that in school, obviously. So yeah, I think blockchain is a really good stepping stone, especially because we have things like social media platforms where you can earn crypto. So the people who are kind of scared to get started, they don't want to give their credit card or send money or whatever it happens to be, you can get started for free in many different ways. And that's really all you need to start to understand how useful this is, what you can do with it. And I think just it's really about not having a cost or risk associated to starting, and that's what will get people in.
Yeah, I'm right on board with you with that. It's like the easier the introduction is, the better the uptake is going to be, in terms of, people not necessarily like trying and getting frustrated or not seeing value at the very beginning of it. And you actually mentioned something that I would say is also another selling point. It's like that centralization aspect of it. And again, blockchain isn't just financial, right? Like it is, that's kind of the big use case that came on the scene with Bitcoin and everything like that. But like you were talking about, social media is another big place where where blockchain has a really big use case. The way I try to explain it to people is, anyone who's been in the situation where, their Facebook account got locked or deleted or something like that, and all their pictures are now not retrievable or anything, you don't have that same problem with blockchain, because those things that you're putting onto Facebook's platform, they are the centralized arbiter of what gets stored and presented and everything like that. On the blockchain, you can put whatever you want on the blockchain. And actually, interestingly enough, in your example about kind of like being a little bit more, financially responsible, it also causes you to pause before you decide to post or put something out onto the blockchain too, because that thing now lives forever, right? And it's one of those things where like you really have to have a mindset where you understand that that's going to be there and it's going to live in infamy if you decide to, drink and post, right? Like you can get into trouble over a long period of time. So you definitely have to be discerning about it in a way. So we mentioned crypto, blockchain, and crypto. So I think most people get that crypto is like a currency that's associated with blockchain. But what does that kind of like marriage look like, or that partnership between the underlying technology being the blockchain and what most people kind of understand to be blockchain, which right now, for the most part, most people just think of Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think this is a very, very important distinction because I would say a lot of the platforms that I look at have the guise of free speech, uncensorable, we're using the blockchain. But, out of the 200 plus platforms that I've reviewed, I would say only a handful are really, oh my God, accurately living up to all the stuff that they're saying. Like a lot of these free speech platforms are free speech until they're not. Right. A lot of these blockchain platforms are barely integrated with the blockchain. So there's only like a handful that are truly doing it and are actually decentralized and are actually, doing all the things that you actually need them to do to truly deliver on their promises. It's hard to actually narrow all that down. So, I mean, that's what a lot of what I do is go and I test them and I review them and I share them with people. Sure. Because most people are only using a couple social media platforms to begin with, let alone going and testing out hundreds of new blockchain platforms to figure out which one's actually good. And most people would probably not put in the time and research to really find out if they were decentralized or actually using the blockchain, etc.
Yep.
So I would say that cryptocurrency is like you said, the financial side of things. Blockchain is the technology that's enabling a lot of this stuff to happen. So for me, there's like key things that I'll always look for. If I'm truly looking for decentralized, because you can have centralized blockchain applications, which is kind of defeating the purpose. But I mean, there's a lot of centralized services. A lot of people think lending cryptocurrency is like really good idea, but 99% of it is done through centralized services where they hold your cryptocurrency. And that is just not a good idea. There's a few services that are coming out with like smart contract lending and truly decentralized lending. But I see like a lot of times people think that, oh, if I stake on an exchange, like this is safe and this is good. And it's like, well, no, not really, because they're holding your crypto and you could stake on your own wallet and you don't have to do it on the exchange, but it's just, it's easier. Yep. So, I mean, I made a video yesterday about why you never keep crypto on exchanges because of all the many hacks and all the different things that can happen. It's best to just avoid a lot of these centralized services because, again, this is kind of what we're going back to. We're getting away from banks and centralized services. And then ironically, a lot of that is kind of being brought back into the space. Like you have PayPal, you can buy and sell crypto, but you can't withdraw it. Eventually, when you can spend it, it's only spendable where they're going to allow you to spend it. So there's now this kind of this attempt to re-centralize the decentralized space, which is essentially what happened with the internet. So this is a very similar progression of events. So originally the internet was decentralized. Then it was centralized by major, like Google, Amazon Web Services, all that kind of stuff, because they've built up all the infrastructure, which is fantastic. But now they have so much power and control over what's going through the internet. If you're banned on a lot of these major platforms, you're not really getting access to like 80% or more of the internet. So right now the internet is more or less centralized, but with blockchain and Web 3.0, we're getting back to the decentralized internet. And I think we might see something like that with blockchain too. It seems like that's kind of what's happening right now. They're talking about making a Fed coin, all this different stuff. And the important thing is to just go back to the original ethos of crypto and like, why do people actually care about it? It's all about decentralization, having the true control, responsibility, and just having that control over your money and anything that you put out, right? Like you were mentioning, putting out content, having it uncensorable, not being able to just be deleted off of YouTube. And like I was saying, there's platforms that are, they're integrating the blockchain. They've got a hash on the blockchain. They've got cryptocurrency. They've got all these things, but the only videos they allow are YouTube and Vimeo. So then it's like, oh, well, then if I get banned off of YouTube, then all of my content on this crypto platform will not be accessible anymore. So it's really not achieving what it's trying to achieve. And that's the case with a lot of platforms. So I would just say making sure that it's actually like using decentralized services. It's actually not relying on old things like YouTube legacy platforms. But again, it's hard to kind of nail all this down and do all this research and stuff. So again, that's kind of why I do all this for everyone, and then just put out these reports.
Yeah, I can't advocate enough for people to go to your channel, regardless on what platform it's on, and just check out, because you do go through like literally step by step, sign up processes and kind of like what things mean and how they operate. And I think that's a huge value in this space, because again, it is a bit of a learning curve. So, and it's to a lot of people who aren't used to it, it might not necessarily be as intuitive as, some of these other platforms. But I think you hit on the most important thing is whatever's like bringing you to the space, make sure that what you're using is actually delivering on what you're looking to, either a problem to fix or a benefit that you're looking to get out of it. Make sure to at least ask the questions and do the basic research in terms of like seeking someone like you out, to say, okay, is this actually working for me in the way that I want it to, or I need it to, is a a really important question. What would you say is the easiest way for, now granted, there's an entire continuum of ways that you can get onto the blockchain and involved in crypto. I think most people within the last 24 months, 24 months, a lot of them, it was just pretty much the news about like Bitcoin hitting, breaking records and things like that. They went and they got, a Coinbase account or something like that, and they threw a couple $100 onto it just speculatively. That's been their introduction, right? Would you say that that's probably a good way to get involved in the space, or is there somewhere else that you would look to kind of like, dip your toe in the water that's, aside of that, or maybe even a step after you've, picked up a wallet and you have a little bit of crypto?
Yeah, because what I did originally was I invested, and then I just let it sit for a while, and for a long time I was in the negative. So
Yeah,
I'm sure a lot of
you had
people.
about 2.5 years of pain there.
Yeah, so I'm sure a lot of people are having that right now after Elon flipped around, and the whole market went completely crazy. So I'm sure a lot of people are kind of feeling that way too. I would say the best way to get started again is to earn it, or find some way to whether you're posting on crypto social media, or you convince your employer to pay you a portion in Bitcoin, or you sign up with Bitwage and you can just have that done automatically, whatever amount. whatever it happens to be, I think the best way to get started is to kind of just get involved with some of the like ecosystems, not just put a little bit of money in and forget it. Because just looking at crypto like it's a potential like a gamble or a get rich quick thing, I don't think that's like a useful approach. Again, if I liken it to the internet, if you were at the beginning of the internet and the only thing you were caring about was like, hey, let me buy a couple domain names and call it a day, I think that's, not really utilizing the technology for what it's actually able to do. So
Sure.
I would say to actually check out whatever you're interested in, whether it's gaming and you want to play blockchain games, or get skins or NFTs or whatever for art, or you're interested in social media. Because I mean, most people have social media. The difference is like, if you're posting a lot, why not earn some money for it?
Yep.
I'm writing a book called The Undiscovered Value of Your Content, because most people don't know that their content even has value intrinsically until they start using a platform like Hive or some platform that is willing to pay you from the get-go.
Sure.
Even YouTube, you can earn money, but it took me like 4 years to start earning money on YouTube, and it's still minuscule compared to what I'm earning everywhere else. So, yeah, I think most people just don't realize that, their selfie or whatever it happens to be could potentially have some value. It's just that legacy platforms are already extracting that value and they're giving you none of it back. The difference with a lot of these crypto and blockchain platforms is that they're sharing that value with you and they're rewarding you for what you're actually contributing. And most people just don't get to see that until they finally get initiated into that.
Yeah, no, I think that is a gigantic aha moment. Like the light bulb goes off, because I think as much as people hear it, they don't really trust the saying until they actually experience it. Like you
it does
are
sound
the
a little
product,
crazy that you can just
right?
post and just make money. Yeah.
It sounds nuts, but at the core of it, like philosophically, you are the product, right? Like without you and what you're posting and stuff like that, other people wouldn't be on the platform, right? And I'm not saying like one individual, I'm saying like in the aggregate, right? Like if people weren't there posting and sharing, obviously there'd be nothing going on. There would be no value and no revenue generated by, the big Web 2.0 tech platforms, right? But that moment that someone posts, and whatever it is, if it's 50 cents or $2, or if they just so happen to hit it out of the park on their first like blog post or whatever, and they make, $50 or $100, like the light bulb goes off and they're like, holy crap, this whole time, whatever, I've been blogging or sharing photography and stuff like that, and I could have been earning, and this revenue normally would have gone to some big tech company, and now it's in my pocket. And yeah, and then the question is, okay, great, how do I replicate that, right? Like how do I do it again?
Yeah.
So let me ask, in terms of just the cryptos. I mean, this is not a investment advice channel or anything like that, but besides like the big ones that most people have heard of, I think most people have heard of Bitcoin. I think there's probably like maybe, and again, I'm just throwing a number out, like maybe half of people that are aware of crypto know of Ethereum, right? Beyond that, I don't think a ton of people are following these other, 1,000 crypto coins that are out there. And
Sadly, they've probably heard of Doge.
yes, yeah, that's probably the third one, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so outside of those big three, so to speak, what other ones are you kind of like tracking or on your radar? Because I think the other thing that people have to understand is some of these things are, I'm reluctant to call it a currency, but some of these things are a little bit more ubiquitous in terms of your ability to use them to like do transactions, and then others have very specific use cases that generate them or that you can spend them on. So in that kind of context, like which ones are you looking at outside of the big three?
I'm pretty conservative when it comes to crypto. So I put out a report every single month of exactly what I've invested in, as well as what I earn from various platforms in case people are interested. But Because I want to be 100% transparent with everyone. I don't want to, be like telling someone about some coin and then they realize that like I've got a bunch of it or whatever it happens to be. So that's all 100% out there.
Sure.
Right now I'm like 60% Ethereum, 40%. Well, no, it's more like 55% Ethereum, 40 something Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
So like 90 something percent of my crypto is just Bitcoin and Ethereum. But then I've also got Litecoin, Bitcoin Cash, Dash. Those three are like my spendable currencies that I'll transact and I'll buy, beer, groceries, whatever. And then I also have LBC for Library, Odyssey, and Hive. That's pretty much it. I have a couple other for various other like platforms like DTC for DTube, MTR for Den.social, all the different social platforms. But I don't like seriously, hold like a big bag of any of them. It's more so just to, test them out, use them, see what's good. But it's because that a lot of these cryptocurrencies, you've got all these different things happening, pump and dumps. Even like Mark Cuban got rug pulled on what was it, Iron Finance, and
Yes.
yeah, and so he got rug pulled on that, and he wrote a blog post. He's like, "Wow, 209% APY. This is so good, guys. Everyone should buy this." And then it like goes from like $60 to like 0.000001 after like 3 days,
Yeah.
and all that tells me is that there's all this hype, there's all these pump and dumps, altcoins, all this stuff. Maybe you can get lucky and make a ton of money by buying Doge, 3 years ago, and then whatever. But I look at everything based on use case. So I would also say don't buy Doge because transaction fees for Doge is like it costs like 3 or 4 Doge to send one Doge now. So I would kind of put that aside as like as a cash use case. I would say Dash is like less than a cent to send. So I use Dash because I don't want to spend ridiculous fees for my transactions. So
Sure.
yeah, with things like that, it always just comes back down to use case for me. And the only super important use cases that I have in my mind are store of value. So that's Bitcoin for me. Programmatic money, or like the equivalent in my mind of like the stock market, which is Ethereum. And we're getting that too. We're getting tokenized stocks by the mass now coming into the market. So that's really good to see. And then I look at, Dash, Litecoin, Bitcoin Cash. I look at that as my spendable digital cash. And then the other one is like utility coins. So things like Hive and Library that can actually like do some useful thing on that network, and they're used to power those networks. And that's the way that I've kind of branched everything out and looked at it. I invested more in various passive income earning cryptos before, but knowing that this would be the bull year based on the halving cycles, I basically sold out of all my passive income earning crypto and just went all in on Ethereum and Bitcoin. I also used to hold real estate tokens, realty tokens. It's tokenized real estate. It's amazing. They buy the properties fully outright, then they tokenize it, then you get to buy the tokens, and then you earn rent directly into your wallet every month where you hold the token. That's the right way to do it. 99% of crypto real estate is we want to build like a $50 million apartment. Everyone send us your money and eventually we'll get back to you. That's like 90% of what's out there. So
hope and pray
so I would
it comes
say do
back.
not.
Yeah.
And that's also a lot of projects too, like not just real estate. A lot of projects are buy this and we don't have a product, but we promise we will. I just avoid all that stuff unless they've got some like really useful, innovative product. I say I'm not going to speculate, and that's fine if people do. I'm sure people make crazy money doing that. But for people who watch my channel, a lot of what I talk about is I want to retire in 10 years or less, and I don't want to make any mistakes or leave any room open for mistakes to be made.
Mm-hmm.
to sort of build out the framework for this. So
Mm.
if I invest in some coin that I think is going to go 100x and I lose all my money, then that's not a very good framework for other people to follow. One thing that I say a lot is luck is not learnable, it's not replicatable, and it's not a strategy. So investing in something with the premise that maybe I'll get lucky
Mm.
is as foolish as, buying lottery tickets.
Yep.
So that's my take on that. I'm much more conservative than most crypto investors,
Mm-hmm.
but I've got like a very specific plan that I'm trying to work out, and I'm very much subscribed to the Bitcoin halvings, and like following the halvings and how that influences the price.
So
So
just explain for anyone who's unfamiliar with that. Explain that.
yeah. So every 4 years, Bitcoin halves its inflation rate. So the miners get half as much Bitcoin rewarded to them for mining a block every 4 years, meaning that naturally miners have to figure out a way to make more money to keep their expenses paid for and to keep earning profits.
Mm.
Naturally, what ends up happening is every 4 years, we see the price typically go up a lot because, again, if it doesn't at least double, the miners are now making less money.
Right.
And I think it's obvious to say that most people don't want a pay decrease every 4 years,
Yep.
and they'll obviously find a way to make that work. And that's like my layman's way of explaining it. But essentially, it's just that there's less supply coming in, so naturally that puts more pressure. And if we still have the demand, naturally, the price should go up accordingly. And I mean, Bitcoin isn't necessarily inflationary or deflationary. It's just got its set inflation, and eventually it'll be next to like nothing, which is fantastic. That's what you want in terms of store of value.
Mm.
So a lot of cryptocurrencies have different things that they like they have different, rates of inflation, different consensus models. Bitcoin in specifically Bitcoin is mainly a store of value. I know originally it was meant to be like digital cash, but I think it's safe to say that Bitcoin is much more of a store of value today than actually used to be spent on things.
Mm.
And that's kind of my general overview of the halving. I have a whole video and breakdown on it, but it's really just that it's just supply and demand, really,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, and it's just playing off of those tokenomics.
Yeah, I think that's something that's important to understand about the dynamics of Bitcoin itself is all of these people that throw out prognostications as far as like what Bitcoin's going to in terms of like its ultimate value or whatever. The layperson has to understand that it's not meant to necessarily have a ton more of it in the future, right? There's going to be a point in time where, the computing power essentially dictates, and I think they're actually going to cut off the total supply at some point, right? But so it's going to have kind of a ceiling in terms of what's out there circulating. And that essentially means that it's going to now be essentially, I guess, would you call it a pure inflation hedge? Because it will be essentially a set amount of something, and then if it's denominated in dollars and we continue to keep doing stupid American things and inflating our currency, that just means that the value is going to go up, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there's any more of it around. Was that kind of a good explanation of that?
Yeah, I think that was succinct, and as an inflation hedge, the reason that Bitcoin is so important, more so than anything else, is because of what we were talking about originally, which is centralization and decentralization. Because I've got gold, I've got stocks, I've got all the different things that I need to have to be diversified, but all of that can ultimately be taken away from me, robbed, destroyed, whatever, except for the cryptocurrency that I hold in a private wallet that only I have the keys to. Everything else is up for grabs, technically. So once you kind of grasp that, and once you look into more, like seeing people's bank accounts closed, all this different stuff, like the CEO of Library had his bank account closed, his wife's bank account, his kid's bank account. seeing stuff like that, and people having bank accounts closed for political reasons, etc. Just knowing that all these things can happen really set a fire under me to have 3 bank accounts, have multiple stock exchanges, buy gold, have crypto, have it stored offline. And there's a million other things you can do that I would, recommend, like multi-factor authentication. Don't have any identifying characteristics in your email. Have a separate email for things that are really, important. Have a separate password that is not used with any of those things. There's a lot of ways that you can protect yourself, but the most important thing is just being able to be like sovereign in a sense where you're not relying on the government or whoever to do something. Because again, if I want to bring, all of my gold on the plane on some trip, that's not going to work. Or, you know what I mean? Like there's all these different instances where that this stuff is not going to work. I've tried withdrawing a stock from one bank, taking the paper certificate to another bank and depositing it. And it is the most strenuous process you could ever imagine. I recommend everyone do it just to understand how terribly inefficient it is. And going and doing all those different processes and realizing how inefficient these things are. And, the bank's charging me $16.95 a month unless I have a certain amount of money in my bank account. All these different things, it comes down to you don't have the true final say. It's usually someone else. Like I have to, ask for permission to get my money out of the bank or to do various things. And you're always beholden to someone else aside from your cryptocurrency that you control and you have in your own wallet, and it's not an exchange. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I that's all fantastic advice. If anyone listen to that list of things that you can do, I would say start off and just kind of get your, dip your toe, get your feet wet, get involved. And then as you start going with it, you will add those. They will basically be like, arrows in your quiver, so to speak. And so you will end up building over time those various things that can help you diversify and protect and stuff like that. So Crim is actually in the waiting room, so I definitely want to bring her on in a minute or two, but I want to touch on something before I bring her on that you had talked about. And you said that a portion of your portfolio is in these kind of this passive income creating bundle, right? What does that look like? Is it invested in a certain type of vehicle? Are these, is it, what you were talking about in terms of those real estate, tokenized real estate investments, or is it something other than that?
Yeah. So,
a lot of it give away the special sauce. I want people to go look at your channel. So
yeah, no, that's fine. A lot of it before was via staking and like the real estate tokens and all that stuff. But lately, in terms of passive income, like I said, I've pulled back a lot because I'm going all in on the growth play for the the bull run of this year. But I have my Hive staked, and I've got MTR on den.social. I also I think I have a little bit of Tron on my Tron link as well, but for the most part I've drained a lot of that, and I've just been investing. But now I'm kind of slowly getting back into building up that passive income. I think a great place to start is Hive, and I'm sure Crimson could talk a lot about this. But if you stake your Hive, or even if you just now put your HBD into your savings, you can get like 10% on that, which is crazy. And what I do with my powered up Hive is you can just leave it, and that gets you like 3.49% or whatever it is right now. Or you can delegate it to someone. Specifically, I delegate mine on dlease.io, and essentially someone's just paying you every day for renting your Hive. And that can help you earn up to like 13% or somewhere around there, which is a fantastic yield. So I'm definitely gung-ho on that, and I've been reporting that, and I think it's amazing. But don't get too tripped up on yields. Like I said, Mark Cuban went for the 209%, and that got him rug pulled. So I wouldn't go around with like crazy expectations, But yeah, there's a lot of reasonable yielding cryptocurrencies that you can stake and earn from. Again, some of the main ones that I've done in the past are Hive, Tron, Steam. And then I have some other things like realty tokens, etc. But there's a million different tokens out there that you can stake. People trade. People provide liquidity on decentralized exchanges. There's a lot of different ways, but I would say avoid lending on a centralized platform because any kind of financial transaction in crypto where you have to give up the control of your crypto is never really a good thing. And the only way that you can do that safely is with smart contracts.
No, that's a good point. I lied. I have one final question. I think I know the answer because you seem fairly. I think it seems ironic to use the word conservative when it comes to crypto, but you seem fairly conservative in your approach to crypto. So, what about crypto trading bots? Is that anything that you've kind of like dabbled around with? I mean, kind of what's your slant on that?
When I first started, I did it.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, it's going to come down to how you set it up, all these different things. Uh, Again, like I said, and like you mentioned, I'm very conservative. So I think things that seem too good to be true are. So I don't subscribe to trading bots. I don't even like technical analysis because what happens is people start thinking they're geniuses. And I have a whole thing on rules for investing. And one of the
Yep.
rules is you're not a genius. So so people who start making money in a bull run think that they're like really good at this. And like I have buddies who started last year and they're telling me, oh, like I'm shorting this, I'm longing this, I'm doing leverage, I'm doing options. And I'm like, the hell are you talking about? I'm not doing any of that. I'm
Yep.
like, you're not an experienced trader. No one, like, you shouldn't be doing all this crazy, all these using all these financial tools that you have no idea how to use, and thinking that you're like able to short and long Bitcoin every day and like do it well. It just kind of blows my mind. But I mean, I'll recommend to all my friends, I think you should just stick to the safe stuff, invest in this, and they'll go and just invest in like all these like altcoins and shit coins. It's kind of like the stock market when people get in and they're like, oh, let me buy penny stocks and stuff. And then they start
Yeah.
losing money. And then they're like, oh, maybe I should just invest in like the good stuff that has, good fundamentals and a dividend history and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's that the carrot of quick returns it's so difficult for some people to kind of like displace themselves from it. It is very intoxicating, especially
Yeah.
during a bull market when what was it? It was in the run up to 07, 08. Someone, I forget who it was, but someone who was like a financial commentator was like the way they knew that the crash was coming was they got in the taxi cab and the cabbie was talking about this new crazy thing that they were investing in or whatever and how
Yeah.
they had made so much money. Yeah, that was like a telltale sign of that kind of like bubblish market environment. But
Yeah.
I think the beauty of the crypto space is it's also extremely diverse, as opposed to, I would argue, and we could get into this in a different episode. I mean, Wall Street, it's been shown that stocks are ridiculously interconnected. And it really has gone with the ETF boom, right? So like, as you have
Mm-hmm.
all these ETFs, just all of these different stocks get linked together. And so, as Amazon and Google and Apple go, so go all the rest of the stocks. And it's kind of taken the true professional aspect out of it, or like what you would say is like, the people who actually are geniuses, they still make money, but it's way more difficult now because there's so much interlinking between all of the investments, which also goes to talk to, the market environment as far as the Federal Reserve and what we do with printing money. Um,
Yeah.
so let me give you one last shot. Where can people go to sub to your channel and get more information?
Yeah, you can find me everywhere at Scott C Business, and if you don't find me through that, you can search Crypto and Things. That's the podcast name, so to speak. If you looked on Spotify or whatever, you can find all my stuff there, and lower your expectations in the crypto markets. Everyone's got just out of whack expectations. even a friend of mine who's up like 200 something percent on his Ethereum, he's like, well, I remember when it was up 400%. This is ridiculous. And it's like, man, if you were in the stock market, you would not last a second.
Just tell him stake it. He makes 8% with ETH
Yeah.
2.0, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, unfortunately, he bought it on like a stock exchange, kind of like Robinhood, but here in Canada, it's Wealth Simple. And I was like, no, because another quick thing, if you're buying it on something like Robinhood, you don't get the benefit of like for example, in Canada, we have a tax-free savings account. You don't get any of those benefits of like tax-related benefits and accounts and things like that when you're investing through a stock exchange, unless you're doing something like we have here in Canada. There's Bitcoin and Ethereum ETFs. I can invest in that through my TFSA. That's a good idea. But going on Wealth Simple and investing, there's no benefit. And then they still hold the crypto and everything. Whereas I could just go and actually buy the crypto, then withdraw it, and then you get the full benefits. Yeah. So what he did that's the worst of both worlds. You either want the tax benefits or the decentralization, and you don't want anything in between that.
I'm thinking of Matthew McConaughey in The Wolf of Wall Street, and he's like, it's a fugazi, it's like fake, we don't let them realize the actual gains.
Fairy dust.
We come to them with another idea,
Yeah.
That's exactly what it sounds like. All right, cool. You're gonna stick around for a couple minutes?
Yeah, I'll hang out for a bit.
Awesome. So I am now going to bring on a returner to the show. I believe this is her third time on the show, which is absolutely fantastic. It means that, first of all, I didn't tick her off enough so that she still takes my messages on Discord and is willing to come on the show as well. But she is Crimsonclad. What's going on, Crim?
I'm good. Man, Scott, preaching to the choir and a fount of knowledge. Good man. I'm also here in Canada, so when I hear somebody kind of being like, please don't use these services, just want to cheer. I want to cheer.
Yeah, and shout out to you for helping me with getting the airdrop and all that stuff sorted.
All right, so we have to talk about, you mentioned the word airdrop, all right? So we're talking Crypto 101, all right? For any of the normies out there that are not hip to the lingo, what exactly is an airdrop?
I can tackle this if you want, and I'm going to use some sort of jaded language here because continuing in the vein of it is a bull market and everything is making money and you feel like a genius and you're amazing. Airdrops kind of play into that mentality that people get. But the idea is if you have a wallet or you're holding an asset already, some other project or token will actually come along and just rain some money on you in the hopes of getting your interest. Because if they give you a little bit, that first little bit is free. And then in theory, you're going to see, this is a great project. I'm going to ape in. I'm going to spend some more money. But the way that this works, if you're coming from like a normie background or you're not, why would somebody give me something for free? Because as Scott and everybody else knows, if it's too good to be true, it is something like a loss leader. So when you think about a retail store, a bricks and mortar store, how do they get you in the door? Sometimes they'll sell things at a loss, or like a great example, which is kind of dumb, but a great example is IKEA. If you ever go to IKEA, they'll sell you breakfast for $1. And it's maybe not the best breakfast, but you'll get some sausage and some eggs and a coffee, and you'll go through and you're like, this is $1. That's insane. Yeah. It's a loss leader. They're taking a loss on that because you came to IKEA to get your $1 breakfast and you had to walk through the hellish maze of,
9 miles.
Yes, MDF and Gravlax and strangely named geometric shaped gewgaws, and they'll get you. You'll buy something because you're there. They, butts in seats. Well, that's hard to do in the crypto world because we don't have seats. The metaphorical butts are just floating around thinking that everything they do farts out money. So this is problematic. How do you get us buttheads interested, right? Yeah. And an airdrop is the perfect way to do it. Now, I'm not slamming on airdrops because if you're intelligent in the way that you handle them when you do get them, they can be a great way to bolster your funds or to find projects you're interested in. But the big thing is just always keeping in your mind, these guys aren't known. They need me. They want my attention. So what is it that I can bring to them that's so valuable? And is that a vector for attack? Which sounds terrible, but in the crypto space and right now, because people are excited and money is flowing, you kind of in the back of your head as a normie, just remember everybody wants that money to flow from you to them. And this is what we try and move away from in today's world, where we have the structures of the banks and things like that. We trade fees and we trade centralization for someone to protect us. In crypto, you're kind of taking those burdens onto yourself. You don't want the fees and you don't want the centralization, but it does mean that you're also taking on some of the burden to be a little more intelligent with how you're using your funds and how you're, protecting your data and things like that. So airdrops are basically, if you're holding a wallet or a token, somebody will come along and give you more tokens in the hopes of getting your attention.
I can remember, let's see, it must have been like 2-3 weeks ago. On Hive, I just had and what's funny is I didn't even know it until there was actually like a post on Hive that like tagged me in it. And it was just a list of a ton of people that were like, airdropped or gifted this crypto. And I got on Discord. I'm like, what the F is this? Like, I didn't buy anything. Like, what the hell's going on, right? And yeah, I had to learn pretty quick that was like, the little kind of like, nugget to get people to at least ask the question, like, what's going on here,
And it totally worked.
Yeah. So, are you a main benefactor of airdrops there, Scott?
I recently used Earnify. Like, I'm not trying to plug them or anything, but it lets you just plug in your Ethereum address and it'll tell you if you've got unclaimed airdrops. I got like $3,000 from that, and I was like, sold. Dude,
whoa. Hold on.
Because there was a bunch of airdrops. Yeah, there was a bunch of airdrops that I just had no idea existed. Or, I traded on like 1inch, like one time, completely forgot about it, found out that they had massive airdrop, and then I was able to just take advantage of all that. So it's pretty awesome.
Wow. No, that's some serious change there. That's pretty nice.
Yeah. And the Uniswap airdrop too, like way back when, was also a big one. Yeah.
Wow. So, all right. So now that we cleared that up, I didn't give Crim a chance to kind of introduce herself, at least give everyone the 411 on how to connect with her. So if anyone wants to go connect with you or find your content, Crim, where can they go?
You can find me pretty much anywhere. I'm almost the only Crimsonclad out there. So if you Google it, you'll probably get me. But you'll find me on Twitter at She's Crimsonclad, and Crimsonclad everywhere else. Wherever you consume streaming content, I'm Crimsonclad. And you'll find me because this mug is just right in your face. So
so one of my favorite things is that everyone wears kind of like multiple hats, right? And so you, Crim, are basically a DJ, I guess you would call yourself. I mean,
yeah, I've taken to calling myself a host, but it's quite funny, and we've gone over it on your show before, and it often comes up, is I'm one of those people who can say, I didn't start in crypto. I mean, I've always been a bit of a nerd, but I found crypto as a creator, as a, like a DJ or a streamer or a radio host. And the more that I started really digging into the things that mattered to me as a radio host, as a photographer, as, that sort of thing, the more I realized, well, content, value, monetization, these all go hand in hand with, crypto and blockchain. And then I got into the blockchain part of it, and the nerdy side of me was like, let's run servers. That got really exciting. So, now I've kind of in this weird mishmash where some nights I play heavy metal and scream at you. And then other days like this, we're talking a little bit more about sort of the implications that crypto has for everybody and ways that it's changing both our sort of financial sphere, but also the way that we think of transacting value. And value is this term that doesn't have to mean money anymore. And it's such an important thing to think about, because what's valuable in your life as a normie, that term, might be your family. It might be your connections on a forum that you really enjoy. It might be your hobbies. It might be, your favorite YouTuber that's valuable to you. Every time Scott puts out a new video, every time Matt puts out a new video, that's value. I want to engage or consume that. And crypto and blockchain specifically now are starting to give us some really important tools to have more control in a time where a lot of our control is being eroded. So it's this weird sort of mishmash of all these things that come together, and they're really important. And this whole crypto is for shadowy supercoders bullshit is language that is specifically designed to scare you away from thinking about these problems, these challenges, and these opportunities for yourself. So, God damn it. You don't have to be a shadowy supercoder, but you could become one, and that's pretty cool too. That's a hell of a name,
So I promised Scott, and yes, there's definitely a lot of people out there that have that image of people that are, messing around on the blockchain, that are these, super hackers and hoodie wearing, the Matrix playing on a monitor in the background, right? So I promised Scott I wouldn't get too political, but I think some of that comes from the way that crypto and specifically Bitcoin came onto a lot of people's radar was the Silk Road and Ross Ulbricht. And so that was definitely something where, again, we won't necessarily get into it. I think most of the people who watch me know where I stand as far as that goes. But that's definitely something where the mainstream folks, right, use that as a narrative to paint it all. And when truthfully that was like one little corner of the blockchain and the Bitcoin world at the time, and it's definitely evolved since then. And so there's just something for everyone. I love the fact that you come at it from a very artistic point of view, because again, that helps shatter that stereotype of oh well, you have to be a super coder in order to get on, and which I mean, some people would argue back in the day to get into Hive, you kind of you almost did have to be a coder to get
well, and all of these sort of starting, even however you may feel about it, things like Binance Chain or whatever, all of these contracts that weren't, they didn't have a UI for it, or same with Ether, tokens that you wanted to move around. They didn't have a user interface. You had to start getting into sort of the command line, and all of a sudden, you're copying and pasting something, hoping to God you're not going to get, everything stolen from you. But at the same time, you feel like a badass because you're I'm coding, and it's, there's levels to it. But the whole thing that we're seeing now, and that idea of hyper Bitcoinization, because, Bitcoin kind of controls the lexicon that we're slowly building out language wise. But, the idea that we are approaching a more critical mass on adoption of crypto comes from it's getting easier. And the problem with that, again, is you're starting to see centralized services, as Scott was saying, custodial options, which are a little bit antithetical to what crypto is all about. But for somebody who's trying to make that first step, the best thing you can do is be cool, you tried to get into crypto. Here's why the route that you've taken, you don't want to necessarily stay on it. Here's how we're going to help you, becoming a little bit more self-reliant and self-sovereign. Because that's one thing that I see a lot of is just shame in this space. Is now it's this new space, it's this cool space. More and more normies are getting attracted to the less unsavory visions that are being painted of the crypto space. But they get here and it's hard and it's a little bit scary. And people who've been here through especially one or more bull runs already are you guys are the worst. Get off these, shit coins. Don't go to these services. And it happens everywhere. We're very tribal species, but certainly as services kind of evolve and more people who are newer to the space come in and find problems, many of them are joining sort of projects and tackling those same problems. So it's every bull run, we get a little more approachable. We get a little more savvy for what people need.
Yeah, and it gets a little stickier too, right?
Absolutely.
Again, it goes back to people that like just bought a couple $100 of Bitcoin because they saw the price go up. There's like an introduction point where you do kind of interact a little bit, and as the product gets better or as the user experience gets better, for lack of a better word, like you end up staying for longer or using it for more things, which is ultimately, you know, what the goal is. So what would you say is a good place? What's a good entry point for someone to get that first, you know, I thought for a moment when you were talking about airdrops that you were talking about like, you know, dealing crack, but
I mean, in some ways it is that whole like your first check out this new token, your first hit's free. Like, now come over here in the corner, I'm gonna slip that into your pocket. But
it's 100% pure.
Yeah. It's all traceable, which is probably not what you want. But you know, I do, and you know, I am really involved in Hive, and actually, I come from Vancouver, BC, which is an incredibly Ethereum-centric area of Canada. So I actually spent more time in ETH than I did in Bitcoin at first. I had Bitcoin, but I wasn't quite as knowledgeable about the community and whatnot. But I always try and start people in Bitcoin, and I know that kind of sounds a little maximalist or whatever, but people have the easiest time understanding that I have $1 that the government gave me, and all of a sudden this dollar isn't worth that much, and that's upsetting to me. So to be able to kind of say, well, here's Bitcoin, and here's how that dollar kind of fares as time goes on. Like, look at them side by side. And the understanding becomes clear really quickly. And of course, because Bitcoin's been around for so long now, so long and not long enough, there are so many incredible resources. And that's something that kind of always makes it a little bit easier. Like, I buy copies of the Bitcoin Standard like nobody's business, because again, I'm like a crazy artist lady that took photos of travel for a while. And so to now kind of be in a place where I can talk with people about sort of the finer points of economic theory, or really start dissecting, you know, my place in the fiat banking system, and how I want to move out of that, or where it matters to me to try and have an influence, and where I want to go my own way and kind of take control. That's wild to me. And so, you know, there's these books and websites and podcasters that are out there, and it's very easy to kind of say, hey, there's an incredible wealth of knowledge. I'm going to show you some. Let me know what you think, ask some questions, and let's get started. So, I mean, I personally do always start people at Bitcoin, but I do think solutions like Hive, and even like some of the emerging token systems on ETH, they're tied to things, or they're tied to communities. They're tied to ideas and tool sets. And for people who don't care about the money aspect, which, believe it or not, there are some who are like, well, whatever, the banks will be fine. It'll be fine. Everything will be fine. Then you can start saying, okay, well, maybe you'd be interested. You use Reddit all the time right now, but you're mad about not earning anything. Well, have you ever thought about a tokenized community or a tokenized, you know, message board? And then you can still go down that path with them. So there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Yeah. Most definitely. So that's I agree, because it's the one that has the most travel in terms of people being, you know, I mean, it's not ubiquitous yet, but it's close. Like, I mean, most people, even grandmas and grandpas, know about Bitcoin, and they're asking about whether or not they should buy some.
It is true.
Yeah. So it's I would say that is a good entry point. I think I mentioned gaming earlier, and I wanted to ask both of you, because you're both in the Hive ecosphere. Have you been keeping tabs on this like land rush that's happening in Splinterlands? It is like there is this like epic bull market in what? I don't even play the game, but it's essentially what, virtual property?
Yeah, essentially. And, you know, I don't want to speak for the Splinterlands team, because I have some cards I've never played personally, just because I don't have time. That's that whole wearing too many hats thing. Is I have a ton of games that I'm like, ooh, I want to. Never gotten around to it. It's not just Splinterlands. It's a lot of things. But, you know, this is something that we're seeing a lot of, and it's awesome that it's happening in the Hive ecosystem, because Splinterlands is sort of a combination of this idea of the metaverse and, you know, a physical land plot tied to a, you know, giant fantasy game. But this is something that we've seen over and over in our sort of technological history. Every time we create a space for ourselves to occupy in sort of a digital way, it goes gangbusters. I mean, people are still playing Second Life and making, real money in Second Life. The Sims are. I don't know what it is. We're so obsessed with ourselves that we want to live in the real world and in the fake world too. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's actually pretty awesome that you have these sort of places to explore. But so you're seeing it now in Splinterlands. I'm going to own a whole land. I'm going to build up an entire story and identity and gaming around it and battling from it. And then also you've got things like the metaverse, which is, kind of what is referred to on the Ethereum blockchain, which is a number of VR and AR, like virtual reality spaces that are becoming incredibly popular with artists, especially. And it's just a continuation of this habit that we've always had. So these are things that, you're right, I didn't even mention that as a starting point for some people. But if you're not into, posting and you're not into money, then there's games. And that's really cool too, because traditionally gaming, we've gone through a number of challenges with gaming as well, with digital rights management and, do you want to buy a game secondhand? Well, you can't anymore because everything's moved to either streaming or download games. What if the company takes the servers offline? You've paid for content and it's gone. Or, I have physical cards and my dog ate all of them. Tough titties. All my Pokemon are gone. So, now we're moving to a space where those cards exist on the blockchain, and it doesn't matter where I go in the world, they follow me and I am the only one that can control them. It's kind of the natural progression of how gaming becomes more tied to us as what we want our persona to be.
Yeah, definitely. Were you a Second Life guy, Scott? Did you ever play Second Life?
No. But I was a fan of like The Sims and stuff. Speaking on what you were just saying though, I think, like WoW, for example, like World of Warcraft, people were buying and selling things illegitimately through PayPal or however they were doing it. They've been doing this for so long, but blockchain would enable them to do that securely. And then, the companies obviously don't want these secondary markets, but if they attach some fee or something, then it could be good for everyone. And then they could facilitate that. And then we could have all these secondary markets and all this amazing stuff that we don't have now. And I think that is very soon to come. A lot of what I'm seeing now is like blockchain based games. What I really want to see is other game companies start to integrate blockchain into their games. And that's when I think it'll really take off.
So totally. I'm going to out myself as an Uber nerd here.
I was going to. So I want to see what you say first before I say mine.
I played the predecessor to WoW, which was EverQuest.
I was going to say it.
Otherwise,
I also engaged in EverCrack.
EverCrack, yes, yeah. There was literally, I forget the TV program. It was like a Dateline or like one of these like kind of like nighttime segmented news programs, and they do exposés on thing, and they essentially put out a hit on this game because literally people would sit there and just play for like 5 days straight without like sleeping or anything like that. It was the clunkiest UI. It was cheesy geometric graphics. But to your point, Scott, there was a incredible secondary market where people were selling the actual currency in the game. Yep. They would meet you up in game, and so you would sell it, like you would buy it on eBay, and then they would meet you up in game. So, but to your point earlier, you had to like take it on faith that you just sent this person like $50 or $100 and that they were actually going to show up with, whatever digital asset that you purchased. But yeah, like the concept that even just the character or the game environment that you spend so much time creating and like putting time into, the fact that they can still just kind of like flip the switch and turn it off and you don't have it anymore, or they can completely restrict where you go with it, it has been one of the biggest failings of those types of like immersive experience games. And yeah, like I might get divorced if EverQuest went on to like the blockchain, and then like I could like revive my own accounts. Like I should hope that it wouldn't. But were you of that generation, Krim? I know you're a little bit younger than I was, but
oh yeah,
yeah.
EverQuest and I, we had to break up, or things would have probably gotten far too serious.
It would have gotten ugly.
Oh yeah. I had an EverQuest phase, and then I told myself that it was better if I just played console games and PC games, and so then it was like, oh, I'm fine. I'll just move over to the Elder Scrolls. Yeah, no, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Same thing. Just now I'm not necessarily farming gold and hoping somebody will buy my fancy epaulets or whatever that I've leveled up, but otherwise,
my bread and butter was RuneScape and Maple Story. Yeah.
Yep.
We finally got it out of him, Krim. We shared enough of our incriminating details to get it out of Scott.
I think we may still look like the losers here on the rewatch,
sure.
but at least he's lowering himself a little bit closer to our
I've
level.
got a bunch of old gaming consoles in the background. You can see like a NES right there.
Oh yeah,
yes,
and the
yeah.
GameCube above it.
NES, GameCube.
Yeah. Dude, that mini disc that came out with the GameCube, that was like, that was the height of technology, man. It was like, that was incredible. No more gigantic cartridges. The only problem was that when you had a problem with it, you couldn't like just blow on it and put it back into the console and make it.
You still did anyways, though.
Yeah.
It made you feel better.
Yeah. Just
now
muscle
it's so
memory.
hard just to get like a GameCube controller so you can actually play like Super Smash Bros. The real way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've gone down a rabbit hole here, and it's all my fault. But let's talk about Hive, because Scott had mentioned, and we've talked about it a little bit before, Krim. But so Scott mentioned before, there's like a huge portion of the blockchain ecosphere that is not decentralized, right? It is these centralized platforms, and you wouldn't necessarily know it unless you kind of like dug or you look under the hood, right? What makes Hive different as compared to some of those other platforms where people might think that they're getting decentralization or censorship resistance?
Yeah, I think the big thing, and you touched on it, is you often have to go digging. And part of that is because we're just not, we're not doing a great job just yet of really explaining why sort of this Web 3.0 decentralization matters to people. Because to a normie, there are a lot of things that come with centralized services that are a benefit to you. Like, you want to be able to recover your assets, or you want to have some help if something goes wrong. So, I mean, the way that I like to think of it is you kind of get the best of both worlds in these cases, because if you have a blockchain that is powering dApps, services, games, you have that underlying ledger that gives you sort of the control to take your information, your tokens, your wallet with you, and you have the ultimate say because you're your key holder. But services can be built on top of that, and they can kind of combine that base level capabilities with some things that make sense to have, centralization. Other services that maybe are only part of the Splinterlands game and don't really matter, don't need to be attached to your wallet. And in that way, you've kind of still got, all the tokens that you earn from playing, they're yours. They can't be taken away. If Splinterlands, their server goes down, you can still go to a DEX and trade those tokens. So that's a huge bonus, because the monetary aspects and the aspects that you need to kind of continue on in the absence of that centralized service still exist. But then you've also got all of this information stored that a centralized service can use in really cool and unique ways. And it doesn't matter if, another site can replicate that or not. You don't need 25 Splinterlands front ends. You just don't. It's not a big deal. And they can present you with these centralized services. So the way that I kind of look at it is, Hive gives a developer and a user the capability to take those tools from the centralized tool set that make a user experience really great. And you can use them. You can build with them. It's not inherently bad to have some parts of your experience centralized. But in the places where, time and money and effort and trust matters, you've got that core blockchain where you don't have to explain to someone, well, tough titties if we go under. It's all locked there in the chain. And that combination really matters in a lot of ways because not everything needs to be in a blockchain. And that's, I think, going to be sort of the next big thing that we have to tackle is we're in this phase where everybody's making a token, everybody's doing an airdrop, everybody's, got a project with a decentralized finance attached to it. But it doesn't necessarily need to be a decentralized or, blockchain product. And so this hype and this bull market is going to catch a lot of people because they're like, every token is fantastic. Look at this. This is a game changer. This has got blockchain now. Oh my goodness. Not everything needs to be there. And there are going to be some people who know just enough to get themselves in trouble, but not enough to kind of be critical when they're looking at entering a project or a service or a site. And that's a hard thing to do because we're telling everyone decentralization is great and blockchain is great. But then they're going to be like, you just said it was great and now this one is bad. I don't get it.
Yes.
So it's going to be a little bit of a challenge to kind of help people understand what are the main benefits of blockchain and crypto that I'm looking for that I want to use, and what are the ones that just sound really flashy that I probably shouldn't care about that are kind of there to attract me and pull bucks out of my wallet.
Yeah. Back to Matthew McConaughey. We take the client's money out of their pocket and put it in ours. You definitely have to like keep your head on a swivel, so to speak, in terms of like all those like bright shiny objects that kind of like flash in front of you. One thing that we've covered in the past, Crim, that I would love to ask Scott about is the backstory of how Hive came to be is something that really kind of sold the platform for me because of that idea that when faced with essentially what amounts to a takeover or a centralization event of this purportedly decentralized platform, there were a bunch of people that were just like, deuces, I'm out, right? Like, we'll go do our own thing. And then they hard forked. So was that something that you were privy to, Scott? Like, did that actually come into your thought process in terms of getting onto the platform? Or was it something after that just kind of attracted you?
Yeah, I mean, I'd been on Steam for quite a while, and I covered the takeover as it was happening. And so I was very gung-ho about Hive being created, and I thought it was a great solution. And it's just another reason why you don't keep crypto on exchanges, because they'll just take it and use it for governance. The kind of thing that if there was anything similar to happen in like the stock market, the SEC would be all over that, right? So that is one aspect of not having regulation being a bad thing. But luckily, we have a great community and decentralization, and Hive was born.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you mentioned taking your money off of the exchange, or at least not keeping the bulk of it there unless there's maybe a purpose for it. But typically, unless you're staking it or you're locking it in some way, there's not really a big need to have it there. Do you like, so people throw around the term like cold storage wallet, right? Is that something that you use, and how would you get someone to like actually, I mean, there's a couple of them that you can buy off of Amazon. Are those kind of like reliable ones, or are there other ones that you normally kind of direct people to that maybe do the job better or a little bit maybe easier in terms of the learning curve?
Is that one to me?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Scott.
So I have the Ledger Nano X and the S. I've also checked out a couple of other wallets, but I will admit the Ledger is kind of like more expensive than some other wallets out there. But it really just depends whatever you want to use. Most hardware wallets offer you the same thing essentially, where it's just that you're able to store your crypto offline. Essentially what I was talking about way back at the beginning, so that there's no entity that can take it away from you, whether it's the government or the banks or whatever it happens to be. That's the safest possible way that you could do it. Because you could just have your crypto on a wallet that you control, but it's that much safer when it's on a hardware wallet, because then it's not connected to the internet and you've got the keys, and it's stored much safer.
And are you using? I forget what basically the exact terminology is, but essentially the unconnected version of Wasabi to administer the cold storage, or do you have another provider that you use on the back end?
I'm just using the Ledger Nano X and
the native
and the software that comes with it. Yeah, I'm just using the native software, so I don't go that extra step. But I mean, it's good for what it is, and then you can just trade on decentralized exchanges and do all your stuff in a more decentralized way.
Awesome. Are you a fan of cold storage? Is that Crim?
Oh yeah. To me, that's kind of the most exciting and terrifying part of the journey, and I totally get why it is. It's so intimidating because we laugh at those old timers who have all their money stuffed under their mattress. Because I mean, when you think about it, yeah, in some ways it's not in the bank, and if the bank gets robbed, it's not gone. But it's also like if you are smoking in bed and light your house on fire, it's gone too. So it's that same idea of personal responsibility and personal custodianship. But there's something a little bit different when you take that step towards. There's really not much tangible when you have a cold storage device or you have a hardware wallet. Yeah, you have the tangible wallet, but you're not seeing a stack of cash. You're not seeing a pile of gold bars, like you say. And it becomes quite terrifying to sort of launch these numbers into space and just hope you have everything set up right. And knowing you hear these horror stories that like you copied your seed phrase with one letter wrong and now you can't get your crypto. So, I mean, I'm a huge, huge fan. I think it's so, so important. But I recognize that it's a journey. And when I started with crypto, I kept my crypto on exchanges. I never really thought about it. And that was because I was buying through exchanges. So I just thought, well, I'll buy it and they'll just hold it for me and it'll be fine. And, a year into my journey, it was like, oh, bad. This is bad. And that's great for me because as a Canadian, I don't know if you heard about this, but we had a fairly large exchange that was growing here called Quadriga. And the last time around, our last sort of bull run, a lot of Canadians were starting to explore Bitcoin and ETH on Quadriga. And whatever ends up happening with it, the founder, it turns out he was using some very convoluted cold storage hot wallet system. Only he knew. He went off to India with his new bride and died in a tragic set of circumstances that include shitting himself to death. I'm not even joking. And they exhumed his body. It's still all up in the air. It's wild. And, it is funny. But at the time, ETH was worth like $100 a token. We were just coming out of the, the bull market. We were in crypto winter. And so people were all like, oh, well, okay. And they write off the losses and they don't kind of realize how important it was. And now here we are again. People who maybe lost a couple dozen tokens are now probably just crying themselves to sleep. Some education is very expensive, and crypto is definitely no exception to that sort of adage. But I would actually agree with Scott. Ledger is a really good place to start. It's tough though because we always want to say like the big Google machine is getting bigger. And, they have had some issues like they did end up having a hack where all of the people who had legitimately purchased directly from their site, the ledgers, their personal information was hacked. And so what that meant is they couldn't get onto your ledger, but they could start targeting you. And, there were a lot of things going out like emails that were phishing emails about, oh, well, just sign in here and we'll update your ledger for you. Or there were actual physical mailers that went to people's houses. And so that's a pretty scary thing. There are some other options out there. I personally do use for my Bitcoin. I do use a cold card. I really like that. And I've heard a lot of great stuff about Trezor as well, which is another type of hardware wallet. But there are so many options now. The best advice that I can give you is, you mentioned earlier buying from Amazon. If it's coming directly from the manufacturer's store, yes, but you always want to be so careful that a hardware wallet is absolutely coming straight from the producer, because if it's preloaded with some bad software on it, and you maybe get it from, I don't know, Craigslist or something, and it looks sealed, it's probably okay. Please don't use it. please don't buy a hardware wallet secondhand. If there's one thing you take away from today's episode is, if you're gonna do it right.
Yeah. Again, talking to someone who might be starting at 0 miles an hour and kind of working up, that's obviously not something that you need to do immediately.
No.
And I would say, if you are just getting started, do not put your life savings into crypto or on an exchange or anything like that. There are some expensive lessons that get taught, on the just within the ecosphere, and that's one of those things where, to something you said earlier, Scott, you have to be extremely cognizant about, you can't have one of those, like, I am blonde, so I can say this. You can't have one of those dumb blonde moments where it's like, like, I forgot about it. I have one of my friends here in Jersey had speak of, like, back to the era of Silk Road, had one of the first Bitcoins that was actually available on a standalone wallet, and lost the encryption code for it. And so, and on top of that, at some point in time, I believe his room got cleared out, whether he went to college or whatever, and then it got tossed. So it's sitting in a landfill with a Bitcoin on it. And so, that's, again, it wasn't an expensive lesson at the time, because I think Bitcoin was only maybe, like 10, 15 cents at the time that it was on there. But now, I mean, we might have to go dumpster diving or landfill diving. I don't know.
You just sent a lot of people to go to the landfill.
We might have to geolocate it somehow.
I'm gonna say that it might take more than one Bitcoin to get me to jump into, like, a landfill in Jersey.
Well, I mean, just point a stick. That's Jersey.
Sorry, that's a cheap Canadian low blow, because we're a disaster. We're a disaster up here too. So,
the aspects of living in this state, as well as a number of other places in this world, have been completely or the positives have been obliterated within the last, like, 24 months or 18 months. So I do not blame you for taking a shot. It's not a low blow. It's well deserved. We do have cows and farmland and stuff like that, but you know what? If you're downwind, you're downwind, and it's just, it is what it is. But all right, so let me talk about. Let's talk about. So, have you guys paid very much attention to, say, like the infrastructure bill and everything that's going on with that in terms of the back and forth on the regulation? Has that been on your guys' radar?
I have been following it, and I sort of know where it started, but admittedly, I actually still find some of the democratic process in the US a little convoluted. Like, sometimes I can't tell, they enter the chamber, they're arguing, now they're not arguing, now you can't have an amendment, now you can't have an amendment, they're still arguing. It's been going on for 62 hours. I've not always got a good handle on where we are in the process. So I believe I saw this morning that there weren't going to be any more amendments, and it hadn't passed, and everything was sort of at a stalemate. I don't know if that's still the case. Yeah,
I'm hoping that it sticks that way and it doesn't necessarily gain too much traction, because to your point about U.S. politics, they kind of, like, just slip these things into these gigantic omnibus bills that are, like, wide-reaching, right? The aspect of it is something that is, like, so the worst part about it, or the worst amendment that could have gone into it, was something that treated proof of stake and then proof of work differently. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's something that, again, we're kind of now past 101, maybe we're in crypto 102. But I'll let you, Crim, talk about it, because we've talked a little bit about it in the past. But what's the difference between those two terms, and why would it not be a good thing if they say, regulated, say they were going to regulate proof of work more than, say, proof of stake?
Yeah, and there again is a wealth of fantastic knowledge, but if we were to just really oversimplify it down to a 101 level, proof of work is essentially a computer sitting there all day solving math problems. And the math problems are getting harder and harder and harder. So it becomes a race to solve the next problem the fastest. But each time it gets harder. So you have to have, your computer needs to be a little bit stronger and a little bit stronger and a little bit stronger. Now imagine a bunch of computers all doing it this at once, competing. Yeah. That's essentially what proof of work is. And so that is a really solid sort of way of distributing a token. When we think of Bitcoin, it is the classic. It's sort of where all crypto and all sort of distribution models came from, is everybody comes on a level playing field. You bring the hardware, you run the software, you compete, and if you can prove that you have solved this math problem, then you will get a reward. And that's awesome. That's a very straightforward way of doing things. However, over the course of Bitcoin's lifetime and continued lifetime, the math problems are getting pretty darn hard. And so what that means is mining now is quite challenging, and it does require some pretty hefty hardware. So on the flip side, you have something called proof of stake. And there are a couple different types of proof of stake models, but essentially, rather than competing to solve math problems, you are basically being entrusted to solve them. And what that means is somebody who is a token holder or a stakeholder in the system, or, has a number of these tokens, stakes them, and the more that they have, the more able they are to basically mine blocks. And so there are two kind of philosophies at work here. And one is, everybody comes into the ecosystem and has a shot at solving a math problem. Mm-hmm. Everybody comes into an ecosystem and has a shot at putting money and time and effort into a token and becoming a strong stakeholder. And you should be rewarded for becoming a strong stakeholder. So both systems have pros and cons for sure, because one thing about proof of stake, that a lot of people are latching onto right now is it doesn't necessarily require super strong computers. We're not having this sort of same hardware race for, insane specs. And so a lot of people are kind of in this time of, change in our world, and everybody starting to really kind of think about climate change or, environmental aspects. Proof of work might scare some people off. Whereas the flip side is for, a lot of people, they go, well, proof of stake, if somebody comes in and has a lot of money, they can jump to the front of the queue, and I don't like that. So proof of work makes more sense to them. Yep. And so that's fine. Both of these approaches have benefits, and you can engage with the ecosystem and the blockchain that makes sense to you. That's the beautiful thing. It's very voluntary, which we always talk about when we get together. But regulating them differently is incredibly problematic. And this is something that we see a lot of already. Tribalism exists, and it certainly exists in the crypto space. And right now, the crypto space itself, well, it feels big to those of us who are in it, and it feels explosive and new to people just discovering it. It is this tiny little drop in the bucket when compared to even just the US, fiat currency. Yep. If you look at all of the currency in existence just in the US, and then the total market cap for crypto, it's kind of shocking. There's so little compared to fiat systems in the world that crypto actually kind of represents. There's very little crypto comparatively, and so it's very difficult to sort of have this type of regulation where everybody's squabbling about, well, this one is better, that one's worse, when there's just not enough of any type of chain yet to solidly make a difference in the world's finances. So in my mind, there's a number of reasons why I obviously wouldn't want to see proof of work targeted over proof of stake, or proof of stake targeted over proof of work. Part of the reason that we have created cryptocurrency and blockchain is to test out these different ideas, to create thriving ecosystems, to develop consistently better technology that allows us to transact value. It's why these things exist. There's why there's, two different, arguably, these are the front runners, ETH and Bitcoin. There's a reason that they've both kind of taken off and really done well. So to have one favored over the other, or one shit on more than the other in, the Senate or in government regulation, it's going to cause a schism inside the community at a time where we're supposed to be kind of going out and advocating.
Yep.
Like, I think this has really scared sort of some people from either side, and they're so focused on their own chain or, being like, well, look at that other chain, go after them, that we're not kind of recognizing the overall paradigm shift here, which is they're arguing about crypto in the government right now. It's that important that it is being, the entire country is at a standstill talking about crypto right now.
Yep.
Everybody, proof of stake, proof of work, proof of I don't know what the fuck, should all be kind of getting together and recognizing that this is a time where the entire world is actually watching what people are saying and doing and thinking about in the crypto space. That's wild. Now is the time.
Yeah. Yeah. What are your thoughts on it, Scott? And Mo, I don't want to push you to take a political position one or the other, but have you paid attention to it? I mean, is it something where you've heard people that are worried? I mean, I've seen the shock headlines, but again, most people know me. When I see a shock headline, I'm like, all right, I need to dig a little bit more because someone's trying to get some clicks. I've seen the shock headlines about, death of crypto or like death of Bitcoin or whatever. Has that been the sentiment, or is it just more of okay, well, we'll just figure out what it's going to look like and then we'll adapt from there?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't followed it a lot, like the political side of things lately. I've just been super focused on the ETH upgrade. But yeah, I mean, there's also a lot of conversation around energy use between the two consensus models, right? So a lot of people have been shitting on Bitcoin for its energy use. But again, I would kind of compare it back to the fiat system. And I'd say, well, I mean, banks are using according to, I think it was CoinShares, or it was a study in 2019. And they said that banks were using something like 650 times the amount of energy of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And, the banks only open a certain amount of hours a day. They're closed on holidays, all this kind of stuff. Same with the stock market. And then you look at other, obviously proof of stake models are better for energy. But again, it just comes back down to what is the benefit versus the cost, right? I think the cost of whatever energy we're using for Bitcoin is minuscule compared to the benefits that we get. And especially with, Elon criticizing it, I think it was that SpaceX uses more energy consumption in one shuttle launch all year for Bitcoin's usage all year. And it's 100% non-renewable too, which is the big part. So it's just ironic to me that someone like that would be criticizing or, pointing that stuff out. And it's like, if we're going to talk about energy use, all the people driving Teslas in China, for example, are still not using renewable energy either. So I really don't like the renewable energy argument going on right now. I'm going to dive into that very soon and do a full deep dive on Bitcoin energy use.
So I'll let you speak, Crim, but I'll ask you the question. Was it Dan from 3Speak or someone else put out a post back when they started talking about this energy consumption thing about the miners that are associated with Hive, right?
And so Hive is also a form of proof of stake. And so when you think about sort of some of these alternative systems that have come about because, for one reason or another, the consensus model is, looking to disrupt the way we've done it before. We've got a very defined proof of work chain. We've got a very defined proof of stake chain. Everybody's trying different things. Hive is something called delegated proof of stake. And you can go to another video if you want to learn about that. But what it basically means is we've got a whole ecosystem of people who are node running using what are essentially like your standard gaming PC. And what that means is if you're one of those people who leaves their PC on all the time, and it's idling and your screen is turned off, but it's still on in the background, that you're supporting the network. And people that want to say this stuff about Bitcoin, this is sort of, I wanted to kind of tack on because Scott's exactly right. This argument, I try to always acknowledge it because I can never be mad that people are caring about our planet or like want to not live in a trash heap or, don't want us to be actually in Mad Max 2 years from now. Like
Yep.
all of that is so valid. I appreciate you thinking about it. And I actually quite like that crypto is sort of a conversation starter in that way. But the problem is yeah, we really like catchy statistics. We like gotcha headlines, like you say. And so it's like, crypto is like 37 idling buses for 67 years. And it's like, okay, no, hold on. Because instead of digging deep into that, somebody's like, oh, I'm going to write that down. I'm going to tell some next time I get in 37 buses. And it's like, okay, well,
2 Chardonnays in at the cocktail party. That's what they lay on you. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But they're custom-made RV buses with solar panels.
But what I like to kind of challenge people with when we get into this discussion, because I am also very, sort of art and creative focused, and NFTs, this was another thing, is normies trying to wrap their head around NFTs. They're like, if Jumbo Jet was flying around the world at Mach speed 72 times, it actually poops out a Pokemon card. Like, no, that's not an NFT. But I understand we're always looking for something tangible, or we're looking for something that we can kind of quantify to help us understand new concepts. So again, that's fair. And the way that I like to talk to people about energy use in the crypto space is like, I don't want to get into whataboutism. I don't want to say, you're giving me a concern that you have. Well, forget that. Look over there. They're worse. That's never a good way to solve a problem. So great. Good on you for approaching this topic. But one of the cool things that's coming out of this is, if we're using a lot of energy, that's actually very expensive. And people who are focused on trying to mine and make money in the crypto space, you don't want your expenditures to be super high because your profits go down. Yeah. And so I know there's sort of this state of right now where everybody's, hating on all types of free market and capitalism. And, there's a whole set of problems that we have to tackle with that, sure. But one thing that comes out of this is, especially even for Bitcoin mining, people are looking for clean, renewable, cheap sources of energy to capture, to mine. And so one of the things that, briefly had a heyday there was, here's El Salvador going, we got volcanoes, we're going to use volcanoes. And that is steam power. That's, literally vents in the ground that are just pooping out steam. And you're just going to pop basically a generator over top of it, and it's going to start mining. And that's geothermal energy is crazy, crazy clean. Yep. So all of a sudden, these problems of how do we mine less expensively, the incentives there align with people who are, how do we find energy that is safer for our planet? Those two things actually go completely hand in hand. And that's really cool. And that's what we're really starting to see is Bitcoin, especially in that ecosystem, mining centers and miners are looking for the cheapest, most efficient ways of actually capturing waste energy. We don't like to think about that, and we don't talk about it a lot in the climate sort of conversation, is that we produce a lot of energy and we waste a ton of it. It just gets burned off, it gets blown off, it gets dumped into the grid. And, at a time where a lot of places in Canada, the US, around the world have problems with regulating and distributing power, it's kind of crazy to think, well, we've just got this vent out back. We're just going to light it up and just burn off some gas. Don't worry about it. And here comes a Bitcoin miner and goes, dude, no problem. I'm going to use that energy to power my miner whenever you got to do it. They pay, to use that waste energy. And all of a sudden, you've got crypto that is now taking wasted energy and producing value with it. And also, diverting some of these energy problems that we've had in the past in a productive and also in some ways cleaner and safer way. So it's one of those conversations that if you can get into with someone and you start talking out sort of the nuance of it, usually they'll be like, oh, that's not quite as bad as I thought. Yeah. So you don't necessarily have to hit them with the, you're wrong and everything you think is wrong, but sometimes, man, you want to say it. You do. I do.
It's tough to not yell, but like once you do kind of like choke it back, I think you hit the nail on the head. They might not necessarily understand the mentality of people that are bought into decentralization and blockchain, right? Like the idea is you don't want to be reliant on a highly regulated, centralized distribution system or supply chain for anything, right?
Yep.
And that includes the energy that's running your mining operation. So yeah, it goes right hand in hand. I mean, like you're a happy person if you can throw up 2 solar cells on a standalone like mini grid and run your mining setup. Like that is the optimal setup for someone. So yeah, it definitely goes hand in hand with that. So look, we're running on 2 hours for you, Scott, and 1 hour for you, Crim. It's an open invite. You guys can stick around as long as you want. I have Pavel sitting in the green room, so it's up to you guys if you want to kick off or hang out. What do you got working, Scott?
Yeah, I'm gonna jump off and make dinner. But this was great. I really appreciate you having me on. It was awesome to meet both of you. And yeah, let's do this again sometime.
Yeah, most definitely. Thank you so much, Scott. I appreciate it.
Awesome. All right. Cheers.
Have a good one. All right. I got Pavel here. Hopefully he's still here and didn't fall asleep in the green room. Pavel, we got you?
Yes, I'm right here. Can y'all hear me clear?
Yes, yeah. Now, I got to be honest with you. There were 2 Canadians, but now there's only 1. Having a Detroit Red Wings player on your profile might be a little bit of contention here. I don't know.
Yeah.
How's it going, man?
Oh, it's going good. How about y'all?
I'm pretty good. Can't complain. So I want to give folks an idea really quickly of who you are and kind of where you fit into the Bitcoin and or the blockchain kind of ecosphere here.
Well, I'm a degenerate gambler, to put
That's awesome.
Yes.
So Scott left. He was the conservative guy. Now we got we got the let it ride here. This is awesome.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So how long have you been involved in crypto and Bitcoin?
Well, I actually got my start in 2017 at the literal top. I made my Coinbase account on December 17th, 2017, which if you go, you go
That
and
is
look
the
at
top.
the chart. Yep.
Top ticked it.
Oh, literally the top. Literally the top. And I got sucked in because that's when I was really becoming, get a little political. That's when I was kind of really going full blast into anarcho-capitalism, and I was totally sold on the ideology behind Bitcoin and crypto. And I put in, fortunately I didn't put in too much, and I only got a little wrecked. I made money at first, and then I got completely destroyed over the following crypto winter. But then I actually made a really good move in 2019 when it was bottomed. I kind of realized that after a year of watching and sort of learning more about the market and the technology, that there was nowhere to go but up from that point. And I basically sold off all of my stock because I'm a young guy. I was in my early 20s at the time. I'm in my mid 20s now, but I sold off all my stock that I had, like all my birthday money. I took all of that and I started trading with it. And I got really lucky with my timing in terms of doing that. And that's just basically sort of been what I've been doing ever since, is just trading. And I went full time in 2019 because I got really lucky playing, that first bounce out of the crypto winter. And I had some really good mentors that I met on Twitter, and that's where I learned everything basically. And that's what I do to this day, is just I trade, and I invest too. I have some holdings, but that's most of my money comes from trading. So
I will tell you, I feel your pain. I worked as a prop trader for an off Wall Street firm for about 2 years. I know that brutal agony of getting the very last fill before the thing drops off of the face of the planet. So I feel your pain. I know exactly where you're coming from, at least from your start there. What would you say your I guess what would you say your kind of like your technique is, or your methodology? Are you a technical trader, or are you someone who is basically trading around a core position? Like, what does that look like?
Well, I sort of don't have one style per se. I use, Scott was saying earlier he doesn't like technical analysis. I do a lot. I use TA quite a bit. Yeah. Obviously, it's not perfect. Things can go south. They can change on you. But there is in my experience, and there is a pattern to the market, and you sort of can figure out where a good place to buy is, where a good place to sell is, just using various indicators. Like my favorite is using exponential moving averages, which are basically just that's calculated by taking price over a certain amount of time, and you can use that for resistance and support zones. Basically like resistance being where it's likely to a sell-off is to start, and support where it's likely buyers are going to step in and it's going to bounce or at least start going up from there. And I, to be fully honest, most of trading is mental, and it kind of depends on what's going on in my life, because I unfortunately around the time that the market crashed, I found out that one of my very close family members was diagnosed with cancer, and that totally messed up I was not prepared. I lost a lot of money going into the few weeks after the massive drop. But, my style sort of just is go with the flow and, use some TA. And basically, like if I can get, into the groove of getting a few scalps or playing some swings occasionally, that's just sort of what I do.
Okay.
And to be fully honest, I really feel like I'm just lucky.
Yeah, I look. It works until it doesn't, right? Have you ever messed around with trading bots at all, or is most of what you're doing kind of like manual, technical analysis, and then you're manually pulling the trigger?
Yeah, it's all manual. It's all me doing TA and sort of just going by gut feeling. I have several friends that use bots, either to varying degrees of success, but like y'all were talking about earlier with Scott, it really comes down to how you set it up, and you have to, you got to be really good with, coding and basically being able to figure that out. Unfortunately, that's not my acumen.
Yeah. When I was a trader, there was the story of the $500,000 hot dog. So there was a guy who was trading oil futures on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, and he was short the market, and he went outside literally for like 5 minutes to get a hot dog from the hot dog cart that's on the sidewalk, and something geopolitical happened, and the price of oil just shot through the moon, and he got stopped out on all of his positions and literally like lit $500,000 on fire in one shot, right? Like there's all kinds of those stories, but yeah, you're right. Like to live that life, you have to be dedicated towards like really kind of the nuance of every single kind of like ebb and flow, or if you're going to be a programmer, like you have to get in the mix there. Let's talk a little political. We typically don't get like very political. We want to talk about like praxis, but I'll flip it to you first, Crim, to get you back into the mix here. Are you reassured or worried that it seems that politicians have no fucking clue what they're talking about when it comes to crypto?
Boy, you're just gonna lob them over here, eh? These nice easy questions. I am going to probably say, and this may or may not be a popular opinion, and I'm going to actually have to hop after this. I wanted to stay because I wanted to listen to the DGen because I need to learn some of that. I need to learn a little more like YOLO balls out kind of thing. But I'll catch the replay. Yes. But the way that I feel about it is that I sort of am experiencing this ridiculous feeling of like schadenfreude or something. I'm enjoying the fact that for once we are starting to see normal people who, it's not even that they trust the government blindly or that they trust lawmakers blindly, but that things just kind of go along well enough that, you've got a lot of shit going on in your life. If it's mostly working, that's enough for you right now. Yeah. But here we are, we have people in positions of power who are saying and doing exceptionally dumb things. And anybody who's even not actually that knowledgeable on the topic can see that they're struggling, they're floundering. And it's really important to kind of press that because these are the people we've elected to guide us and to make laws on our behalf and to spend our money. And so it's important to kind of have these things happening that show people, ooh, the choices that we have right now aren't so great. So what
Yeah.
are we going to do about it? And so it's bad in a lot of ways. But I do think that if nothing else, these last couple years especially, and yeah, crypto, for the first time, people are starting to see the massive manipulation in the financial system. They're starting to really understand that there's a whole lot going on that they're cut out of purposefully. And kind of seeing that these figures aren't infallible and don't have an actual good plan is the first step to kind of thinking, okay, well, if I can't trust them, what am I going to do for myself? How am I going to either change this situation or protect myself, knowing that shit is wild?
Yeah.
So I'm going to say maybe I'm heartened because if nothing else, like I'm excited again that the entire world is stopped and listening to the fact that we are arguing about crypto
Yeah.
in the most important government in the world.
Yeah, yeah. It's the to see the lack of understanding play out in real time is almost, I don't know if the word's cathartic,
Yeah.
but it's like the little girl is screaming like they have no clothes, right? Like the emperor is not dressed, like and so there has been, I think, a lot of direct response just to the threat of them putting in this kind of like stealth amendment into this bill that I think is also really productive. I'm also of the mindset where I am a skeptic of all kinds of governmental intervention. So I'm like, God forbid they smarten up and they actually figure out a more intelligible way to go about manipulating this market that we don't want manipulated. But from that standpoint, yeah, it's a little bit like glass half full, glass half empty kind of feeling on my side. So, what are your thoughts on it, Pavel?
Yeah, I mean, it's very heartening to me too, because we're at the they fight you stage of, the first they laugh at you, then they ignore you, and then they fight you, and then the final stage is you win.
You win.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's like you were saying earlier, Crimson. It's most of them don't really know what the hell they're talking about, which is great for us because that gives us the element of surprise going forward. That by the time they realize what's happening, we're too ingrained in society and we're too valuable to regulate away and really screw over. So, that's bullish to me.
Yeah. Krim, I know you have to bounce.
I do. I'm sorry.
Let me give you one last, maybe quick question. I don't
Sure.
answer quick. I don't ask quick questions. But what about coins like Monero or like Pirate Coin? Do you think that those are going to be able to execute on what their intention is, essentially, less traceability or at least a little bit more anonymity?
Yeah, I do. And with the caveat that I think the end game for sort of the larger crypto space is going to be the most decentralized and the most private. I truly believe that's where we will end up. With sort of, like I say, this caveat of, Bitcoin, there is something about Bitcoin that I'm going to continue using it. And I actually don't mind that it's not that private. If you're really just talking about, well, I could trace from wallet to wallet. Like, yeah, you don't know it's my wallet, but yes, you could. You could, practice some coin forensics and follow. But that's the point. No one is hiding, there isn't forget a shadowy super coder. There isn't a shadowy super fund manager pushing numbers around in the background, at your expense behind, closed doors, protected by a government who's, in on the payola. Instead, we're all watching the same transactions. We're all seeing the same thing. We're all agreeing, and we're going out and doing what we want with our money in the way that we want to, proudly and freely. And if I want to be anonymous, then I can be. Somebody can certainly see what a specific coin is doing. But if I practice good OPSEC or, I'm mindful of how I use these coins, then my Bitcoin will never be truly what would you call the opposite of, private? But I wouldn't be, doxing myself with my Bitcoin.
You wouldn't be out there flapping in the wind. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Harder for me, but, it's still possible. So it's, I do believe that some of these coins will pull away and that privacy with them will be really important. And I do think the end game of the crypto space will be, like I say, the most decentralization. And for people who want to practice complete privacy, not because they're hiding something, not because they're, the evildoers of the dark web, but because honestly, nobody should care if I'm going down to the corner store to buy a coffee. No one should care, and no one needs to know that I'm doing that. I am exchanging value for a service, and I and the other person have agreed, and that is fine. Then that's available as well. And I don't think that's going to change for Bitcoin, and I don't care. I don't want it to personally. But you can always use more than one tool. And we are going to see this sort of emergence of incredible tool sets to do whatever we want. And that's the exciting part of crypto.
Very exciting. And you actually said a magic buzzword. One of our next coming episodes, I have to set it up, is an OPSEC episode to talk about operational security. And just what you can do to, if you want to, retain some of your anonymity, or not necessarily kind of broadcast, like you said, your presence or your identity all the time. So, look, I want to say thank you. I appreciate it. When do you go on MSP Waves next? Is it Thursday night?
It'll be Saturday. I'm working on a contract for a crypto company right now, so I will be taking a quick break this week. But I'm going to flap away in the breeze, and I will look forward to listening to you and Pavel, because, like I say, I am not a trader. I am the stereotypical risk-averse woman. I just stack my sats, and it's worked out pretty damn good. But I like hearing the ballsy, successful traders. It's fantastic to hear people who can, have the mental and testicular fortitude to go through with it.
Just total. Yep.
Bye.
Thanks, Grim.
Nice meeting you.
Yeah. Bye.
All right, so let's get into it. So, are you trading just one crypto, or are you kind of in and out of multiple, Pavel?
Multiple, mostly DeFi tokens is what I trade, because that's, in my opinion, is like the most disruptive sector, and also the most, I think, prone to just going crazy in terms of up only action. Most people, they trade Bitcoin or Ether. I actually, funny enough, the thing I trade is actually Chainlink, the Link token. Funny enough, that's where most of my money's been made, is just playing that, which is ironic because the whole Chainlink, the Link Marine thing is that's swing linkers, people that play the market, you get screwed. But for whatever reason, I have good luck with it, and I think I'm just kind of in tune with the chart because I've been watching it for so long.
Mm-hmm. To draw an analogy, it's not necessarily like one for one, but even people that have a shorter time horizon in terms of how long they're holding, or what kind of moves they're playing, sometimes they'll do some like technical analysis, or I mean not technical analysis, some fundamental analysis. Like if you're looking at a stock or something, does the use case or the adoption of the actual crypto really factor into it for you, or are you a strict technical analysis guy?
Well, most of the time it is just TA. So like, even if it is a shitcoin, and I feel good about the entry on it, I will take the trade. I prefer trading, tokens that have true fundamental value to them, because that sort of protects you from those like one-off like rug pulls or just terrible events happening to one specific project that, say, they have a terrible team behind it, and all of a sudden there's a hack because they didn't secure the smart contracts properly, and you get completely screwed. While like obviously, like sometimes, like most of the market's tied to Bitcoin, so if the whole market, Bitcoin kind of takes a shit and the whole market, kind of like follows it, you get hit, but it's fine, it's whatever. But there's definitely that added risk to trading like pure shit coins, especially like Uniswap tokens that are, for the most part, just a scam.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the market from kind of like that old hat that I used to wear, and I'm definitely awaiting the day where there's more of a decoupling. I think part of the issue is, and there's still some level of systemic risk, because a lot of those tokens are kind of either referring back to Bitcoin, or they're at least independently kind of deriving some value from Bitcoin's current value. So that's something that I'm always kind of looking at is which ones are decoupling and why. Like if they're decoupling for a reason like the use case falls apart or the adoption is, I think XRP was like that at one point in time, where apparently at one point in time, like I think it was XRP that I think Santander Bank, right, was going to use it for international clearing, and then all of a sudden it got de-emphasized in terms of that use case, and so it fell off for a while, and then it started to climb back up again. But the hope for me is that there will be a day where there will be a very robust market where Bitcoin's down 2 or 3%, and some of these coins are rallying because of other dynamics that are behind them.
Right. Yeah, I can't wait for that day for each sector of crypto to be fully developed, because that's truly going to be a trader's paradise, because each market's going to be playing according to its own rules. Yep. And it's unfortunate whenever you have great fundamental events coming up for a coin that you're trading, and then all of a sudden, for whatever reason, Bitcoin shits the bed, and it's very frustrating. But like you're saying, I think there's several sectors that deserve their own decoupling from Bitcoin. Obviously, I think smart contracts deserve to be their own thing, like Ethereum, Polkadot. Oracles need to be their own thing. DeFi, NFTs. These are different technologies with totally different use cases. I mean, even like, for example, in tech, Facebook doesn't go down because Microsoft or Apple had a bad earnings report. It doesn't make sense for it to, and it shouldn't in crypto. But unfortunately, we're so early. It's all tied to Bitcoin because Bitcoin is still king, and for good reason. I like Bitcoin a lot. Most people do in crypto, and it's frustrating. It's very frustrating to think about actually as a trader. It's like, oh my God, like we always got to keep an eye on Bitcoin, but
yeah,
I'm definitely very excited for the future. And I think it's kind of, there's silver lining in the fact that it is all dependent on Bitcoin, because I think it shows how early we really are to be, in this technology, in this sector. And I'm very excited for the day that we eventually do decouple.
Yeah, and you mentioned the fact that it is really it's becoming, right, a trader's kind of paradise, and a lot of that has to do with transaction fees, right? Like not specifically with Bitcoin. I mean, the Bitcoin transaction fees are through the freaking roof, but in terms of some of these other coins, the transaction fees are extremely reasonable, fairly low, and quite frankly, I can say from my personal experience back in the day, a lot of my would-be profit was chewed up strictly by transaction costs. And so is that something that you've noticed, or are those transaction costs beginning to creep up and kind of affect it?
Well, they've definitely gotten a little bit better after EIP 1559, because it's nice having a more clear idea of what you're going to be spending per transaction, and I think it's definitely like fees have gotten better over time. But it's also, it's kind of frustrating because the times when I'm making the most money is the times that I'm spending the most on fees, because that's when the network is, most congested, because that's how it works, supply and demand.
Yeah. Which by the way, we were talking about regulation before, is something that they may come after too, because people that are, I'll just call them collectivist in their thinking, in this ever, this continual search for equality, that is also something that they'll probably target as a reason why it's not a good proxy for currency or transactions or anything like that. They'll say, oh well, if you get stuck during a high volume period, you're going to have to pay up during it. But I mean, for folks like you and I, we couldn't give a crap. Like, it just makes sense, right? Like it's
right.
Practical in terms of the use case. But yeah, I think that's definitely something that they might end up keying in on in terms of those transaction fees. But I can remember paying, let's see, I used to pay 7 cents a thousand. Was that right? No, it was $7 a thousand, $7 a thousand. But the problem was you paid in and out. So if you bought 500 shares and then sold, that's 1,000 shares moved, and so that's $7 out of your pocket. Which at the time actually wasn't that bad, because we had just moved away from there was a again, you're mid-20s, so I don't know if you necessarily remember this time period, but the market used to be mostly market makers, so actually human beings, and the market traded in eighths, so it would trade 12.5 cents a time for the stock price, and so you were paying that vig on each one of those moves if you bought the top end of that transaction, and that was essentially the way the market makers made their money. Once they moved to more decimal trading, now you were paying, each step might be a penny, or it might be a tenth of a penny, which was dramatically better because you weren't necessarily getting nailed with these kind of 12.5 cent swings all the time. But from that standpoint, the network operators use that as an impetus to increase the transaction fees, which was the biggest headache that was associated with it. But that's one thing that I think everyone's looking to play out, because they see the transaction fees on Bitcoin, which we're coming off of a high period of activity where they were kind of astronomical, where they're going. What else are you kind of following? So you mentioned a couple of names. You mentioned Chainlink. What else do you kind of look at?
Well, I mentioned earlier decentralized finance. So projects like Aave, Synthetics, Bancor, WooTrade. That's basically what I'm focused on mostly. But I'm slowly getting more excited for the whole concept of decentralized insurance, which I think is going to come after DeFi sort of becomes more quote unquote mainstream within crypto.
Yeah.
That's really what I'm getting super excited about. And
so anyone who is a layperson and doesn't understand what the implications are for decentralized insurance, what would you kind of describe it as?
Well, basically, like right now within the United States, you have so many government regulations. This is the best example I can think of because I'm an American. I'll dox myself a little bit, but for example, in health insurance, you can't compete across state lines. That's a big thing. That's a regulatory burden. There's even more, but a even bigger one is that a lot of times insurance doesn't pay out. You have to prove a lot of things, and there's a lot of arbitrary decisions made by people, in that structure that you have no way of getting a hold of or even knowing they're there.
Right.
And what decentralized insurance offers is basically a system that is totally transparent, because the way smart contracts work is that you can audit them, you can see everything you're agreeing to beforehand. And what the person who's providing the insurance to you has to do is they have to actually provide the insurance to you as stated in the smart contract, because their funds are tied to it and they have to pay you out. And that's a huge, huge thing. And I'll just use a personal example. And I think this is part of the reason why I've become more bullish on that concept is that, I mentioned earlier, one of my family members was diagnosed with cancer.
Yep.
We had we supposedly had coverage. We supposedly had the perfect oncology centers and everything set to go. Mm-hmm. And there was an issue between the provider and this one oncology center that was perfect for my family member. And it all came down to one person who didn't fully understand some detail that they had in the contract previously with the provider.
Yeah.
And it set them back 2 months, which is freaking ridiculous. It's thinking about it, I'm a little emotional thinking about it because, obviously it's close to me, but
sure,
that's something that is just unacceptable. It's totally wrong. And decentralized insurance would fix that because, from the get-go, it's okay, here's the agreement that we have with our customer. Here's the policy, and it's going to be paid out. And here's the providers. It's all set in stone. It can't be altered. And that's a better system for society.
Yeah, that's and we could get into a gigantic conversation here about how health insurance in this country, or even something as basic as life insurance, is also so convoluted because of it seems like a trope, and so like everyone gets on, people that are more libertarian or anarchist, or even the small government Republicans that are out there saying like, we need to limit and deregulate certain markets. It seems like just a talking point. But truthfully, there is an immense amount of substance there, because a lot of these inefficiencies are created by those regulations. It's not created by, some arbitrary thing that the people are putting in place.
Right.
It's these reactions to reactions to reactions to regulations. And so, as someone, I can nerd out on insurance all day, because that's basically my 9 to 5. As someone who's familiar with, say, like elective benefits at work, anyone who has, AFLAC or Colonial Life is another provider, or I'm forgetting another big one that's out there. But so, and anyone that has those benefits that they're typically paying out of pocket for, and not necessarily getting their employer to chip in a piece, that has a very much the coverage trigger is a lot simpler. And so, like, for instance, for your family member, if they had a cancer policy, it's based off of indemnity, meaning if I prove I have cancer, the policy just pays out X number of dollars, right? And all you have to do is very simple coverage trigger, right? Doctor says I have cancer, it's been identified, bang, they pay it out, right? Very much so analogous to the efficiency of a decentralized blockchain-based insurance policy that, again, you can get as crazy as you want with it. So it could be as simple as, I get the diagnosis, I get this amount of money, or, anytime I go to the hospital, I get $500 or whatever to pay for the ER bill or whatever.
Right.
Or, like you said, you could build something that's extremely specific in terms of even elaborate setup. So like if I ever do come down with it, like if I want to go to the Mayo Clinic and have this physician and like, you can actually build out that coverage trigger in that insurance policy, which is huge. I love that aspect of it because, 99% of my job is explaining why something is or isn't covered. And even myself, I'm sitting there going, holy crap, why isn't this covered? Right? Like,
Right.
It just makes sense that it should be, and the person who bought the policy expects it to be as well. But yeah, no, that's definitely exciting. That space is fantastic. Have you looked into lending at all?
Yeah, the primary lender for crypto is Aave. That's the main one, and that's the one that I hold a little bit of.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna probably get crucified for this. I am just my whole involvement in crypto is 95% trading. So I don't actually get involved with the actual protocols. I don't actually use them. I should, but I don't.
Yeah.
But Aave is like the primary lending one, which it's very simple to describe. It's like it's a decentralized lender, so you can put up collateral. And we were talking about this in Twitter messages before. Is the idea that you could, you can use anything as collateral as long as there's someone on the other side of it. Like, for example, using NFTs as collateral, which, obviously, like if you're thinking about an NFT as like an art piece, you could hypothetically use that, but realistically, you're going to be using real world items that are tokenized as NFTs. Like, for example, like a deed to a house, like say, all right, since I'm a degenerate gambler, we'll use this example. Say you want to use your house as collateral to get some Bitcoins to go trade with.
Bet the mortgage.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. So, we're using an extreme example here, but say that's what you want to do. Like you want to use that as collateral. Like you take that, go through a decentralized lender. There's more besides Aave, but Aave is the primary one.
Yep.
You put up that collateral. Someone on the other side lends you the money, and you go out and you do what you do with it. And if you can't pay it back, well, then they take ownership of your home, and if you can pay it back, well, good job. You're a lucky degenerate gambler like me.
Yeah. That's definitely something I want to dig into the future. And so we didn't talk about it with Crim when she was on, but I mean, she runs a website or a D app called NFT Showroom, and that's essentially what it is. It's a showroom for digital art, and each one of them gets tokenized, and you can buy the NFT for that work of art, and there are now coming into the space places that you can actually use a wide variety of different types of NFTs or tokens as that collateral, which is, I mean, it's crazy. It's obviously wrought with, again, like buyer beware or whatever, but I think, or it's also lender beware as well, because, if someone sees some value in that NFT and then is, resolute to lend you some crypto or something of value without collateralizing it, and value is relative. So that person might be more inclined to do it. And then if you made contact with someone else, they wouldn't be as likely because they don't see the value in that, tokenized asset or that NFT that you're holding. So I think that's super, super interesting. Let me ask you this. Let's kind of like get back to the trading. So in terms of like how you're going about this, is this something where like you have a time horizon in mind where you want to make a certain amount? Is this just something that you do as kind of like an aside from your 9 to 5, as almost like you would play a sport? Like, how do you kind of like view it for yourself?
Yeah, for me, it's my life, because I went all in 2019, and I
Wow.
I've worked a variety of jobs after graduation that were just unfulfilling, unsatisfying, and I was very fortunate that I was able to sort of learn on the clock before, like during this time, that I was able to learn, like, okay, this is how to read charts, this is kind of how you make trades. And I started out paper trading, and I got really good, actually, like just paper trading.
Yep.
And I realized, I'm like, oh, I can do this. So yeah, for me, it's life. It's my life for now, at least. I think one day, crypto is going to stabilize and it's become more like stocks and commodities. There's not going to be insane pump and dumps like there is now. Yep. Unfortunately, the Wild West will one day be tamed of crypto. And, but until then, I'm going to be doing this. Someday I want to be doing other business ventures. I have some entrepreneurial ideas, outside of crypto I'd like to pursue, maybe some in crypto. I'm not sure about them. But in one way or another, I'll always be involved in the market, I'll always be like trading, or I plan on actually earning a massive amount of passive income. Like I'm hoping that I can, make good enough decisions with my stakes that I am able to just basically set up generational wealth doing that. That's the goal.
That would be, look, that's an amazing goal. I hope you get there.
Thank you.
That's something that I think a lot of people are also looking at in terms of like they've changed their mindset because of the environment that we've lived through over the last 18 months. What that future looks like. I think a lot of people are, regardless of whatever their, money target is that they're looking to hit, I think a lot of people are reevaluating, okay, if I had this much put away and I made, 6% on it or 7% on it pretty routinely, could I live the rest of my life, be happy, and not necessarily, be a part of the rat race or go do something that I actually want to do as opposed to something I feel like I have to do, right? And so I think that's fantastic. I think that's a great mindset shift for people. And again, it's a massive red pill, if not a white pill, for people, because they are really starting to do the head work that they kind of like were complacent about in the past, And I love the fact that you're doing that head work at 25. I wish I was 15 years younger and doing that head work right now, as opposed to sitting at the almost ripe old age of 40 in about a month here. But look, I love the fact that you're kind of like in there in the mix. I mean, do you typically have giant price swings, or are you keeping really tight stops so that if things move against you, you're pretty much out quickly?
Yeah, I'm a fan of doing tight stops. I'm a very big fan of that. because even if you get, like I like just as price moves up, I like to move my stops up gradually with it. I like to find an area where, like it's below support. I'm like, okay, if we go down to this area, like say on the chart, like for example, like we're between the, the 21 and the 89 EMA lines, which are, I like to use 21, 89 and 200 EMA lines if anybody, wants to do their own TA. But like I'll use those and I'll just sort of just figure out like, okay, like based on previous price action and, using these moving averages, like what's a good place to sort of like place a stop, when I first enter, like how much, like what's a good area here? Like, is this a good area to enter? Then as it moves in the direction I want it to, I move my stop accordingly. And then if it, goes down, to a certain point, all right, I'm out. And then I just wait and see how it develops. And, that kind of can screw you out of catching bigger moves sometimes that are more volatile. That's fine. But that's fine with me because I have enough holdings in projects that are, in my opinion, solid, that if the market does, move and moves without me, I'm going to at least be up that way. Yeah. So, and so, I prefer that.
So it sounds like you do kind of have like a core holding that's also kind of like working for you, even if you're not in a short-term position. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. I have several tokens that I hold that I have very strong belief in going forward.
That's good. That's good. Yeah. I think a lot of people get into trading with this complete all or nothing mentality, which is, I think it's inherently flawed. Because again, like you said, like you could get whipsawed a lot or just something kind of like shits the bed and, now you're sunk or you're trying to catch up to even, which makes you make even worse mistakes. Having that core that you're trading around is a good home base where it's like, all right, no matter what, even if everything evaporates, I have that, right?
Right.
What platform are you typically using? Are you using something like a Binance, or do you have something that is a little bit more sophisticated?
I was using Binance for a very long time. Just I use a hardware wallet, where that's where I send everything off of, and I hold it there. And because y'all were talking earlier about not using not keeping your tokens on exchange, which apps you should not do unless you're actively trading, in my opinion. And even then, like even on Binance, which I'm not using anymore because they're limiting the amount that you can withdraw daily. And as a full-time trader, I don't like having my limits reduced because I've gone over to KuCoin. That's where I am kind of at now. I'm still using Binance because I actually am not like gonna get kicked off like my limits for another 2 weeks or so.
Yeah.
But I'm getting ready to migrate over there, and it was frustrating because I was actually about to like hop over to FTX, which is another leading exchange, but they're doing the same thing Binance is doing, and my account was, even though it was older and it was fine to trade with at the time, I learned actually from our mutual friend James that because I recommended to him to go create an account there, to start using trading for his bots because Binance was about to make it know your customer for bot trading, even for using APIs. And he informed me that it's like, oh, hey, like they're doing this here too. And I was like, oh shit. So KuCoin's where I am now. That's where I recommend if anybody's interested in trading, use KuCoin because they don't require, know your customer KYC requirements for trading there. That's what I like.
Yeah, that was a big deal for like Coinbase and some of the bigger exchanges because they were really trying to court not necessarily the folks like you and I that are interested in kind of that transaction without that whole regulatory process or the so quote unquote paper trail or whatever that goes with it. And so as they got bigger, obviously they got on the radar of the regulators, and the regulators kind of like put the screws to them, and they caved pretty quickly because there was a lot of money at stake. But yeah, I that's one thing about the world of crypto is when something like that happens where a platform gets big and all of a sudden they don't follow, not that Coinbase or Binance ever kind of communicated this, but if they stop following those kind of like, philosophical reasons or how they operate or whatever their kind of like core reasons are, if they deviate from that, like it is literally the Wild West. Like something else will come up to replace it that is now a place to go that will now allow you to recapture what you lost with this other place, kind of like shifting gears, which I really appreciate. What is some like? How did you learn technical analysis? Is there a resource or like some kind of educational channel online that you follow? Where did you really kind of pull that expertise from?
Yeah, I learned everything from following a bunch of guys on Twitter that were way smarter than me and still are smarter than me.
Okay.
Yeah, like they, and a lot of them, as they get their accounts have gotten bigger, they've stopped posting TA as much. So unfortunately, they're not as good education resources as much as they are sort of now. Like just general sentiment and like shit posting, fun shit posting at least.
Sure.
Yeah, but that's where I learned was from that, and also just my own trial and error, like applying the patterns that I learned from them, and just using basic, like Investopedia has a whole, they have a whole section on TA, just like random websites, just random YouTube videos. I was very much a self-taught trader, and I still am. Like I really, it's funny because if you look at my bio on my my Twitter handle, it says I got a D- in finance on my second try. Which is true. I did. Okay, it's an exaggeration. I got a D because my university didn't have the minus and plus.
No
system.
minuses. Yeah.
But if they did, it would have been a D-.
Yeah, you got the 60. You
Oh yeah, and that was the last class. It was my senior semester, and I needed to at least get a D to walk the stage and graduate on time. And it was a miracle.
Yeah. Well, I think that also goes to show how you can be successful in an area, even if, my our very first episode on this show was about like homeschooling and getting kids away from this kind of like traditional educational model. And I think that just kind of goes to show how, like what's accepted as convention in terms of like whether you got a good grade in this subject or whatever ultimately determines whether you're going to be successful in something like it or something related to it isn't necessarily like a 1-for-1. It's not a foregone conclusion. And so, technical analysis it's not, to get all nerdy on trading. It's not like Black-Scholes equations or it's not like worrying about essentially like Bollinger Banded trading or anything like that. It's you're sitting there and looking at formation shapes, right? So
right.
I would imagine maybe you were probably better at geometry than maybe finance, like especially if you're a visual person, right? Like people a lot of times don't get finance because it's numbers, it's symbology and more numeric, whereas like someone might be much more akin to being able to, identify shapes or formations or tendencies and trends visually than just staring at like a block of numbers. Do you kind of like slant in that direction?
Oh, 100%. I am terrible at math. I suck at math. I'm one of the worst people at mathematics in the world, but I am very visual. Like from an early age, I remember this, like every like state test that I would take or, like my report or whatever for mathematics, I always tested in like the top like percentile for graphs and charts.
Yeah.
Like even from a young age, like when I was a poor student, like when I didn't care about school, even then I was just kicking ass at that. Like everything else was awful, but that area was just like I was in like the top like percentile. Like for some reason that was just, which I think plays into, sort of my quote unquote luck with things. Is just I'm just a very visual person, and I'm lucky that way.
It sounds not too good to be true. It sounds unbelievable, but there are some people that are just natural traders. It doesn't like, coming from someone who sat in a room with, 40 mostly male, like, testosterone upped guys who, thought that they were going to make millions and millions. like only a handful of them were successful, and maybe only one of them was wildly successful. But there was just something about like I know you've used the word luck, but quite frankly, like there are just some people that defy statistical luck, and a lot of it has to do with it's either intuition or there's also a lot of nerve that goes into it. I mean, it takes some balls to pull the trigger on something, um, especially if you're doing technical analysis and it's just like, okay, well, this looks like the way it's setting up, so I'm going to go with my gut and I'm going to just, pull the trigger on what I expect to happen because that's what it feels like it's going to do. It's much different and seems counterintuitive to people, but it is much different than someone just throwing darts at a dartboard. Like there is something there. Like, I mean, can you kind of feel it? Like, is there like an ethereal kind of like, like Quan that you kind of like feel when you're trading?
Yeah, it's something I can't really describe. It really is like a gut feeling when I'm looking at a chart. It's like I just, for whatever reason, can sort of just deduce that, like that's like it's where I want, like it's a good entry, or and also like a lot of it too is just watching. Like the big thing was like sort of just figuring out the patterns to like the probabilities behind the patterns. Like okay, like is this likely to play out? Like for example, like a falling wedge, like it's a very basic TA pattern. If you can identify it, like okay, like basically 80-85% of the time, that's going to at least result in a bounce of some kind.
Yep.
So if you can just find the patterns and play the probabilities with tight stops, you can be profitable. You may not be super profitable, but you can, if as long as you deploy like good risk management, you're fine.
Yep.
But yeah, a lot of it is just my gut feeling, like combined with TA.
It is. Again, if you don't have it, you don't get it. Like it's almost like someone who were you? I'm like, I guess you're a ice hockey fan.
Yeah.
Were you a sports guy in high school and college?
No. This is actually the funny part is I was a fat kid up until like halfway through high school, and that's
all right.
Finally when I became athletic. So I spent a majority of my youth, and I think this also plays sort of into my skills, was playing video games. I grew up staring at a screen, and a lot of it was mostly shooters really, but I think for like somehow like some way that gaming skill, that nerve, I think that kind of helped me develop into the trader I am today. Because if it's kind of like trading to me, especially TA, whenever you're looking at the chart, it's almost like a platformer in a sense. It's like you're kind of like you're watching like this game play out in front of you of patterns, and you're trying to figure out like what's coming next. And that's sort of the way I view it naturally, is that way.
No, that's I feel you. Like that's I played sports in high school and a little bit in college, but really like the bulk of my time was playing video games or just futzing around with a computer, right? Like I was probably, and you were probably of this mindset too, like I wasn't afraid to break it, right? So my whole thing was like, okay, I'm just going to screw around with it and see what it does. And then, if I can make it do something new, fantastic. I'll just remember that, right? Then move on and screw around with it in a different way and see what it does then, right? And so, a lot of that has helped me technologically because there are certain of my peers that are only slightly older than me that are way lower in terms of that technological adoption curve. And it's because of that almost generational dynamic. And a lot of it has to do with timing. I mean, like, some of the first generations of computers were basically when I was coming through elementary school. So, that also kind of helped. But there's something behind that. There's, and again, there's a lot of naysayers out there, a lot of trolls that'll be like, like gaming nerds, whatever, right? Like, but no, there's something to it. Like there's something in that pattern recognition. And it's also, it could be the games that you played that primed you for this versus, if you were playing something completely different and maybe you weren't training your brain in the same way,
Right.
What were your games of preference when you were younger?
Well, I grew up mostly playing Halo and Call of Duty. I'm kind
Okay.
of, just a dumb console kid like that. But I also had a love for RTS games. So Command and Conquer and Age of Empires, I played heavily. And the game I played the most was Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds, which is just a clone of Age of Empires 2. Man, I'm going down a rabbit hole of nerdism here. But I think that kind of plays into it too. Is sort of like you have to manage this base you're building up. It's like almost like you're managing a position that you're building up. You have to defend it against people that are trying to come and take it from you, and you have to sort of manage all these different things that are moving around at once. And at the same time, you have to have this grand strategy to it. You have to be reactive.
And you're anticipating contingencies too, right? Like
Yes.
you're
Very
trying to
often.
think multiple steps ahead. I mean, it's almost like playing, it's a blinky light version of playing chess in a way. Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, when I was younger, we didn't necessarily have that. We had Stratego, which is more of a board game.
I love Stratego too.
Yeah, Stratego or Risk. I mean, like Risk is also the example of it, But then there's all the memes of like people playing Monopoly and playing Risk, and 5 hours into it, someone flips the board and like, F this, I'm done, right? Like this is taking too long,
Yeah.
So, all right, cool. I want to be respectful of your time. We're running up on 3 hours here. I want to make sure if anyone wants to connect to you, what is your @ on Twitter?
Yeah, my @ is @Pavel Chadsuk. The Chad is all caps, but it's PavelChadSyuk @Pavel Chadsuk on Twitter. I'm just a shit poster most of the time. I don't even post charts. I don't really give much of a heady opinion on things. It's just kind of me reacting and just sharing dumb memes.
Yeah.
But if you want to reach out to me, if you want to DM me, if you want to ask any questions about crypto, about trading, just please go ahead, just slide into my DMs and I'll answer any questions you have to the best of my ability. I'm very passionate about helping people learn about crypto, get involved in crypto, and just make the right decisions, because I made so many boneheaded mistakes in my first year, and especially also my first just year in crypto, and my first year, even to this day in trading, I make stupid mistakes, and I want to help others avoid that. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me.
Awesome. Love it, love it, love it. Look, thank you very much for coming on. I know, it might be getting a little later for you, so I appreciate you taking the time. Something I didn't ask you was, so typically the spikes that I see on crypto a lot of times happen overnight. Are you a night owl in terms of your trading, or are you setting it up during the day?
Yeah, I actually do most of my trading at night, depending on the conditions. But usually the joke is that Asia likes to dump on us, and they do. So the best setups tend to come later in the evening, and then I usually stay up into the European session to sort of see what's happening with the markets here, what direction are we going, because the farther west you move, it seems that for whatever reason, we like to pump the price up and get all bullish, and then Asia dunks on us, because it really is an Asian dominated market, because they're just technology is kind of more of a thing over there than here.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, no, it's I always notice that, so that's interesting. So yeah, if you are a night owl and you have you don't have the risk aversion, you could definitely get involved and make a name for yourself, or at least make some crypto and make some bucks. So that's good. Look, everyone who made it this far, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Throw the video a like, share, retweet, make sure to sub. And look, we'll be back next Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern. Have a really good evening, Pavel. I go trade. Go make some money.
I will. Thanks for having me on, Matt.
Have a good one.
You too.